That's, oh yeah.
So
Right?
here, hold on. Wait a little. Haha. No, you're good, man.
Well, it says that you're starting.
My dad's from moonshine country, so
Ooh.
I'm used to it. Yeah.
So, Jaws, how did you learn, or how did you meet with a supreme dictator?
He honestly just started leaving really deep and thoughtful comments on my videos, and we would just kind of go back and forth occasionally on certain things. Obviously, we don't agree on everything with regards to Battlefield, but we agree on quite a
Ooh,
bit,
okay.
I would say.
Uh,
Right. Exactly. If you just agree on everything, it gets boring. You gotta have some discourse.
okay.
It definitely sounds like it. I don't know. Right. I mean, I think that'd be a fun as hell server, to be honest. Just see how that goes. It's an interesting argument to have, although I would have to side with more modern U.S. military, sheer technology and manpower and everything. Yeah. Kind of doing solid in the whole logistics department. And plus, where's the fighting taking place? I mean, are they trying to invade the U.S.? Because that was impossible in 1944. Okay. Oh, yeah. I mean, uh, we could hit them without even seeing them. Like, I don't mean like tactical artillery either. I mean just numerous other ways. Mm. I try. I try.
So I got my live screen going, and it's not recognizing Raven. Oh, it does recognize Ravenfield now. That is fantastic. So, Giles, I like to demonstrate Ravenfield as a sort of poor man's Battlefield Portal. Really fantastic stuff. So he's got here the instant action and conquest screen. Conquest is still in development, but instant action is where all the magic happens.
As always, got to get that quick action. And pleasure to be here, first of all. Just want to say that. Always cool to be a part of these things.
See, the humble dude goes at it again. Alright, so, now, would you want me to lead off with a configuration I set up, or do you want me to try to create something of your request?
I mean, I'm down to see what you, because you're obviously a little bit more familiar with this than I am. So I'd like to see, what kind of options we got here before I start trying to pick something that I want to see.
Sure thing, sure thing. Alright, so we're going to go with, say, you know what? I gotta say this. Let's do 2042. Battlefield 2042 reimagined in Ravenfield. So, boom. I got some approximate vehicles from mods on the Steam Workshop. And let's go set the bot number to say, oh, I don't know, maybe 200. That sounds like a good amount. We're going to keep things balanced up. Custom maps.
Yeah.
As we wait for the whole lot of them to load. Let's choose a classic Battlefield map. I'm a Battlefield 3 shill. Why don't we go for, not Davamon Peak, or, why don't we go for Operation Firestorm?
That's a good one. That's a true classic.
The funny thing is, I've actually never done well on Operation Firestorm in Battlefield 3. It's only Battlefield 4 I actually do well on that map.
Pretty much the same. I don't know why. I don't know.
It just flows so weird.
Clicks better. Yeah, it's definitely one you gotta get used to. It's really cool though. I love the Levolution that they have on it and everything like that.
It is. All right. So we begin weapon selection. They recently reconfigured the screen, so I'm going to go with this mod. Let's go for some anti-armor equipment. But you know what? Maybe not anti-armor. Let's go with a minigun. We got our medic bag, which is actually vanilla content. So I'm spawning at the main base. And this is going to be interesting to see. Alright, now all the bots are filtering out, and they're taking all the vehicles. So watch what happens in a bit. It seems that they've occupied all the vehicles. So what am I supposed to do? Oh, it's very simple. Luckily, there's a mod that adds the ability to spawn in whatever vehicle I like. It's no portal call-in or no call-in system, but let's see what I can get. Why don't we get the Nightbird knockoff? See? So
the killer egg.
It's what it's called. The tail road. The tail's kind of misproportioned, but whatever. Now, these vehicles are not balanced, but they are fun as hell. And look, I got to deploy flares because someone already deployed anti-air measures. Now, let's pull up my map. Looks like they haven't reached any of the capture points yet, so let's cut off their first wave using explosive minigun fire. So
I'm seeing a lot of good features that aren't in 2042. So.
Yeah, the fact you can play it offline already.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's a good start. Does it have a scoreboard?
Yeah, it does.
Nice.
Now, of course, this is a completely unbalanced vehicle, but it's... Yeah, I set the bots to hard, so... Okay, well, I guess I did not deploy my shoot in time. But we start off with a nice kill streak, so let's spawn at one of the flags in the warehouses. Alright, so we're back on foot. We got no squad, but say we want some ads. Let me try to... Okay, for some reason I can't... they're not in range of my commands yet, so let me try to pick them up. Okay, I got a squad of 3 people, and I'm running the 2042 HUD mod. So I want to move these guys. The squad commands are rudimentary, but say I want a screening party. I'll send them over there to their deaths because there's probably a crap ton of enemy AI already. But here's to hoping that they can survive a slightly longer amount than I did. And so we got our flags, we got custom map lighting. I mean, virtually none of the stuff I'm using right now is vanilla, but it's freely available on the Steam Workshop, and it runs alright. Probably the biggest reason for my frame drops right now is because I'm streaming, but the early access build I'm on uses a different engine version of Unity than the base game, so you can actually get really good multi-threaded optimization. Older non-early access versions are reliant on single thread process instead of, so only one thread of the processor instead of how many you got. But as you can see, obviously the AI are AI, but you can plenty of fun.
They're about on the level of 2042's AI.
Some of the 2042 AI, I think, like the default in Portal for multiplayer can actually be pretty competent, but the problem is they fight well, but they don't behave the same way a player does. So you get weird scenarios.
Yeah, no, sometimes like they'll just be standing out in the open, just like crouching for no reason, and then other times they get in a helicopter and annihilate like your whole squad, and you're like, how did that even happen?
Exactly.
It was an AI, what the heck?
So
it's just kind of inconsistent. But
alright, so I want to showcase, the minigun. I haven't showcased that, so that's definitely modded content, but right now, okay, I think they fixed the third person or the animations for the minigun, so I mean,
I'm excited to see.
So it looks pretty intimidating. It sounds intimidating. Alright, let's see if it has any anti-air utility. Probably very slight anti-air utility. Okay, muzzle velocity is a bit too slow to be effective like that, but we can have some
lead on it.
Alright, let's see. This is the section that always got me killed on this map. Let's see, and no, I did not have, yeah. So you always got the sort of aimbotting from the bots, but it's not too bad. Especially when you have air power. So we're going to give another run to the helicopters.
Actually, one question about the helicopters. Do they have the same kind of, or at least attempt to have the same kind of flight physics and flight controls that they did in like BF3, BF4, those kinds of games? Or is it just kind of rudimentary, kind of like 2042?
It's actually it's different. So like 2042 puts a lot of emphasis on momentum, but it's got its problem. Battlefield 3 is kind of a balance between that and realism. But these, I would not say these helicopter mechanics are realistic, but they're also momentum-based, but in a more realistic way, if that makes sense. It's kind of like Rising Storm 2 with the helicopters. So if you notice, I'm going forward. If I try to yaw, I'm not really changing my trajectory much, right?
Right.
If I start tilting where the the thrust vector for my rotor blades changes, that is how you can actually change your trajectory in flight. So it's a it has the realistic philosophy, but of course it doesn't have the full aerodynamics and physics of it. So it's not really how Battlefield does it, but it's not punishing either once you figure out the philosophy, basically.
Okay.
And of course, it all depends on what helicopter you're using, if it's vanilla or mods. But some of the mods, the performance is pretty terrible in terms of thrust, and other mods you got a super maneuverable, lightweight, entirely killing machine, such as what I'm using right now.
Right.
So I'd like to give you an example of what capturing a point may or may not look like. So I'm going to deploy landing gear, try to land here. That's that didn't go to plan, but we need to get on point fast. So I'm going to deploy a med bag for these AI bots here, and probably myself once we get swarmed by the spawn wave. And, well, that can go to work. Maybe I can blame it on the alcohol, but it's more likely just the consequence of how effective the bots are. But let me showcase some more of the equipment. So, this is new stuff, the air support and the, let's see, I think they should have, yeah, so these two mods are super new, and I think you're going to be impressed by what they do.
AC-130, like.
So let me see. This is the C-17, I think. Well, where's the? Okay, now, yeah, this is part of the issues with early access. Not everything works the way it's supposed to. So, let's try this. This, I think, is a C-17. So, what do you want? Airdrop vehicles, soldiers, or a supply crate?
Airdrop vehicle soldiers.
Vehicle. Okay, so
Vehicle. Yeah.
we can do soldiers next because I think the soldiers will give you like 20 dudes automatically assigned to your squad.
Okay.
There we go.
Okay. So yeah, vehicle.
The Battlefield 3 Endgame memories coming back, even though I only played like 2 hours of it when it was still alive.
Yeah.
So now we wait patiently for, I think, what is supposed to be an APC. I'm not sure if it is or not. Okay.
Now, can the APC spawn with soldiers inside of it, like
I
an
don't-
AI squad?
I don't think that's possible yet.
That would be a cool mod.
It would be, and I don't think it's unfeasible right now, but this stuff is pretty novel for the community, so we'll see how it goes. And who
Right.
knows, with the engine updates, it might become possible. So
That
this is from a popular mod called, I think, Vanilla Plus, where a modder has decided to recreate vanilla assets, but with a more updated style. So you got your classic infantry fighting vehicle with chain gun, and I think coaxial gunner. Now, of course, we won the battles, but there's an endless battle mode, and I think in point match, where they'll keep spawning, even though you've technically won. But with this mode, that's not the case. So we get to drive around and explore the maps a little bit. Or if you want, you can execute people. No, I don't think there's anyone left to execute, so we'll call it that. And you can quit at this point. Now, that's not the only game mode available in Ravenfield. You also got, actually, before we move on to Spec Ops, which is the, I wouldn't say the standout game mode, but it's a really unique one. What kind of scenario do you want me to create? I know you haven't seen all the assets yet, but just tell me anything. I'll see if I can make it work. Just right now, with what I got installed at the moment.
Ooh. So it looks like the game modes are like named differently. Like, what is each game mode, or are we just gonna try to set up something in regular battle, like Conquest?
Go with okay, yeah. I guess I'll explain the game modes, and then I want you to just tell me what you want to see in a sort of battle or or any sort of conflict, and I'll try to make it a reality. So
Okay.
battles, what we just did, symmetric. Spec Ops is you spawn on a map with like 3 AI squad mates, and you go around completing various objectives, and then you extract.
Okay.
Domination, I think, is basically domination from the Battlefield series. Skirmish, you deploy and with 1 life, and you have 3 deploy waves, and you have to capture points. Point match is basically conquest, but it can be asymmetric depending on how you use the balance slider. And then haunted is kind of like zombies, where you fight skeletons.
Okay. Cool.
So, any
Okay.
requests?
We'll just stick with battle for now because I want to see like the different factions and everything.
All right, that's fair. All right, I'm gonna go with something a bit zany. Do you watch anime much?
I don't really know.
All right, dude.
I've seen a lot of the memes.
I mean, that's kind of prevalent on the internet. All right, you're probably in a similar boat, I guess, where you're anime aware, but you're not into it.
Right.
All right, well, you know what? Just when you get too many anime memes on your Reddit front page, it's nice to get revenge sometimes.
I'm assuming we can have anime as the enemies.
I think these are like Fox girls from like one of them that was popular a few years ago. I didn't pay attention much, but there was a few anime girl skins on the Steam storefront. So we're gonna fight Fox girls. Let's choose Kaleidoscope. Why not?
Yeah, why not? I mean, it works. Makes sense. I like the
just
lore
works. All right.
here. We're setting up a good backstory.
I mean, I was actually really looking forward to playing on Kaleidoscope before launch, and I'll be honest, like the map, I don't know, man. It doesn't look as pretty as I kind of hoped, and the 64-player access you get with like bots is not, in my opinion, the most interesting part of the map you play on.
Yeah, no, it's the first time I played it, because I was looking forward to it, I was excited the first time I got into it, and I was getting in like gunfights between the 2 skyscrapers in a conquest match. I was like, oh, this is really awesome. I really like this map. And then the rest of it just kind of, like I said, in the 64-player version, the first sector is just open field. Like, it's not exciting. It is just open, and not even open field, open concrete. You don't even get the grass. They're like, here's some concrete, have fun.
Yeah, I mean, I got a little dirty little secret because of like the poor PC optimization. I've mostly been playing against bots and or 64 players, so I don't even see the full map that's
Yeah.
theoretically promised. So you know how like the cool sort of awning areas over here, I don't play on those ever because they're not available unless I want 20 FPS. The I mean, it's kind of disappointing, but it looks cool. I mean, like I said, once they fix optimization, I think it'll do a lot. But until then, you know, if I want to see the entire map, I think I'll just play Ravenfield 2042.
Totally understand. I mean, it honestly doesn't even work that well on console. My Series X, I can't even play 128.
I'm not surprised.
I get frame
sadly.
drops.
Your
It's-
CPU isn't all that much more powerful than mine in some respects, and if I can't even get consistent 60 on 64 player full blast, I mean, what can we say, right?
Yeah, not great.
All right, so it's now we're on knockoff kaleidoscope. We already got some more of our infantry spawning. Let's get some armored vehicles up in here. We're gonna go with I never played hardline, but I do like the assault couch. So why don't we give this thing a whirl?
Let's do it.
Let's see if we can get any road kills. Okay, I think the physics engine is a bit. I don't know if it's on our side or not, but we'll see. This thing handles absolutely insane. As in, it's completely weightless, has high acceleration, but has poor grip. Okay, well, that did not work out.
It looks like a ton of fun to drive.
Oh, it is. The problem is the maps just don't play nice with how lightweight it is, but, you know, that's the American dream. That's the reason
Lightweight, a lot of firepower.
And now I'm going to show you something, the second cool mod that's become available quite recently. This is going to be... I hope this is it. Oh, there it is. So I think it has Call of Duty callouts. Now, unfortunately, with the early access, the sort of... Wait. Yeah, there's usually highlighting elements that would outline the targets for, but they're kind of broken, so I think they might have gotten removed. But in the meantime, I'm getting plenty of hit markers. Okay, yeah, now you can see them, which is tragic.
The tragedy of the anime girls.
And just FYI, okay, that's friendly fire. FYI, I also have a mod installed that adds in the Battlefield 3 voice lines for characters whenever you do any sort of action. Okay, now that's friendly fire too. Acceptable casualties. Acceptable casualties. That's what it is.
They weren't PTFOing hard enough.
Exactly, man. And let's see, what's this? Oh yeah, that's the... I think I managed to get one kill on a tank in Battlefield 3 using the gunship. I know, I was the only time I ever used it. And now, the kill streak is over, so let's get some soldiers in here.
Airdrop in a battalion, sir.
Oh, here it comes.
I guess 20 soldiers would be like a platoon or something, but...
Yep, so they're going to be... You know, it's going to be interesting seeing how some of these guys get off the rooftops.
They might have to kamikaze their way down.
You know, I'm not sure if the AI is smart enough to do that or not, but we'll see. I think luckily the angle just worked out right. So we got 20,
I think so.
18. Okay, so 2 of them died on the way down.
It looks like most of them are gonna make it to the ground, though.
Yeah, they should. The ones with the survivors are on the ground. Now they're just regrouping on my position.
Here we go. Come on, fellas, for Mother Russia.
Alright, you know, let's drop some healing medication just in case for the ones who broke a leg on the way down. Alright, so they're regrouping. You know what? I think that's enough. We can start. Let's command. What is that gaggle? Okay, let's go order them to investigate that. So you can see the guys in my squad are highlighted.
Yeah.
I don't know what that guy's doing, but, you know, probably one of the unfortunate ones. And I'll watch these guys, they're all charging over there. Let's see, you know what? I feel unfair just telling them to go in on infantry. Let's give them some useful stuff. Such as an infantry fighting vehicle.
There we go. Can they, go and... They'll just, willingly go and grab their own vehicles, or do you have to, command them to?
Okay, so if they're not in a squad, I think they'll grab vehicles on their own if they feel like it, but if they're in a squad, they'll default to joining you in your vehicle unless they have Yeah, I think that'll override any other orders they had.
Okay, that's cool.
Okay, it appears that we've won our war on Fox Girls.
Here we go. Victory achieved.
Oh wait, no, that's the wrong key.
99-year-old Putin would be very proud.
Oh yeah, man, 24-2. Oh yeah, that is true. Well, you know what? Actually, dude, get this. I think hentai might actually be the most popular porn category in Russia. I've seen it on infographics. So I'm not pulling this out my ass. I've just seen it on places. And from what I've read anecdotally and like seen anecdotally on YouTube from YouTubers like Nafuckers, I would not be surprised if it's true.
Yeah, no, I definitely follow a lot of Russian dudes on Twitter. Not a lot, but like there's a few that like Battlefield, and they post a lot of anime and stuff like that.
Oh, these
Like,
robotics
makes
are
sense.
they're from another mod and they're very well done. I'll
Yeah.
Okay, so let's see. I got boosters.
Wait, is that the mech from 2142?
I don't. It's not from 2142, but I think it's okay, I think it's bugged right now. First off, but yeah, it's bugged, but it's definitely fun. So you got your aiming reticle for what is this? Okay, for a rail gun. All right.
Okay.
Okay, we got an automatic. I think a chain gun or something. Okay, we got that. Oh, we got a grenade launcher.
Spawn, kill him.
Battles
No
won.
mercy.
We're recovering anime technology to see why what their intentions are. All right, let's go.
Yes.
Okay, that's. Yeah, it's like 8 different guns or something, but these things are pretty neato. I added them to this faction just so they wouldn't get completely overpowered by the air vehicles I normally would have used. So that was theoretically the balance, but it didn't work out so well. And
Right.
look, I got a surrender mod.
Oh, they all just surrender? The surviving ones?
And I mean, they can. It doesn't really change the outcome much. Alright, so that's a demonstration of Kaleidoscope with the alternative 2042 mod route. So you've gotten a bit more awareness. What scenario would you like to see?
I mean, the one we were talking about at the beginning of the stream, if you're able to do it with the Germans versus the modern US, that'd be pretty fun to just go ahead and see if we can do
right
it.
now. I'm into a lot of world building, so I've made similar scenarios such as stuff like that, but you know, I think I can get it working. So we're gonna. Oh shoot! I think I might have accidentally deleted the German soldiers a while back, but that's okay. We can figure out something that will work as a suitable substitute.
Yeah. That's a lot of factions.
It's. I mean, to be fair, half the skins I think are from one mod.
Oh, okay. Still cool though. You can do all that.
We'll stick with the Argentinians. So this was, I do some world building, and one of like the main scenario I work on is a alternative Cold War where the United States remains isolationist, so the Nazis and French take over Europe. So this is
nice.
An alternative Cold War gone hot scenario. So let's find an appropriate map to play this out on. Oh, why not Port Valdez?
That could work.
Yeah, I had those World War II skins a while back. I think I didn't really play with them much because all the cool stuff in the mods was more for modern gear, but I might install them again. The one of the performance limitations is that all the non-map mods are loaded into RAM as you start the game, so if you don't have enough RAM, you can't load all the mods you want.
Okay.
That's probably why I cleared them off, but I mean, I got a 16GB machine I could use in the future, so that's always available. Alright, so we're going to go classic. Okay, this is probably the one where I enabled all the weapons. We're going to go with the M16A1. We're going to go with a, we're going to go with a Browning, what was it? They call it P35, but I know it's the Browning HP, yeah. This is a, alright, we'll go with the, Law. That sounds appropriate. That sounds like a good 1984 loadout.
Yeah, it sounds pretty solid.
All right, so let's see. And of course, we have our people being air deployed in.
As you must.
Dude, I really
cool like Red Dawn.
The only complaint I have with Ravenfield is there isn't much in terms of modding or vanilla support for air and mobility, but there are some cool things which I'll show you right after this.
Okay.
Okay, so you can see a bunch of... and now these guys, these skins are from a Diesel Punk mod. Kind of like the... What was it? I don't know what it was called. Like the old Xbox Series Iron Ace or something.
Mm-hmm.
So it's supposed to be like 1980s, but Diesel Punk retro futuristic gear. It does a good job for what it is. Now,
yeah.
Let's see.
Yeah, it looks fitting.
Yeah, it sounds pretty appropriate. And we got a nice M60 pattern to complete the... Okay, there we go. This mod is a bit confusing because it never really tells you what tank shell you're doing. You have to go with interpretation based on the pictures. And let me just say, I'm not good with pictures.
Yeah, no, I need the text. Just be clear.
Okay,
tell me what I'm looking for.
All right, so it looks like we're making a successful approach, and we're advancing. Okay, and that guy just got yeeted away because of the funky physics, but he seems no worse for wear. Okay, that guy got yeeted too. Let's see. I never really played much Bad Company 2, so unfortunately I don't have as much, I don't know how you put it, nostalgia. Okay, there we go, there's number 3. I don't have as much nostalgia, but looking back, I can definitely appreciate the innovations the Bad Company series brought to the franchise.
Yes.
Okay, there's
it was before my time, so Portal's honestly the first time I've been able to try it at all, really.
That's the good thing Portal does it. I think there's a lot of people who... Okay, those are not friendlies. And,
yeah.
Okay, and it looks like the shells are bugged. Okay, now my weapons are bugged.
You hear my cat?
Okay, no,
Jeez.
I got destroyed. Unfortunate. So, well, this, as I said, this battle is not going ideally for us, but nothing can be rectified, or nothing cannot be rectified with air power. So
air power is the way.
It's it's always the best. And you know what? For now, let's save the intruder for later. Let's go with a nice... Okay, that's a transport. Let's go with a nice Huey gunship, because who doesn't love a nice gunship?
Gotta have a good gunship.
Now, of course, the frame rate's just dying, but normally it'd do better.
Everyone knows if you stub your toe or get a splinter, you gotta call in air support.
Exactly. All right, now we're gonna hunt. Okay, looks like we got some anti-armor targets to go with. So I see how the helicopter maneuvered there. That's the sort of semi-realistic momentum coming in.
Yeah.
But it's still a lot more maneuverable than 2042 by a wide margin.
Yeah. Yeah, it looks like you can really kind of swing it if you need to. It feels like, I don't know, 2042, sometimes it feels so sluggish to fly the Nightbird. Like, you really have to almost gain a bunch of altitude and then dive to get a ton of momentum if you're going to make a run.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. And then there's the fact that you're not going to have your weapons, your miniguns your weapons are... Okay, I'm sorry, let me try to be a bit coherent. The miniguns are too inaccurate and too quick to overheat, so you have to stay on target for such a long time that your run won't give you the time for that. And your cannons are nerfed to shit because, I don't know whatever, they're nerfed to shit, so they're not even good anyway. So you gotta just rely on the rocket pods, which then everyone complains about, so they nerf effort. Okay, I'm sorry, it's just that the Nightbird right now appears to be in a sort of balanced death loop.
Yes. Because they're going to nerf everything about it and not buff the one thing that needs to be buffed, which is the miniguns. The miniguns just should be the primary.
No, I don't, like, Battlefield 4, okay, worked. People complained about it some, but, like, okay, I don't know. I can understand the anxiety over having the scout helicopter stomp on infantry, but with 2042, there's enough going on that I think it's quite fair to have the Nightbird at least have functional miniguns, because
yes,
the stupid part is the side-mounted miniguns on the Blackhawk and Portal are like accurate. They're way more accurate than base game. If you put those instead of the base game miniguns on the Nightbird, that would fix my complaints. I wouldn't be completely happy with maneuverability, but at least I'm combat effective.
Totally agree. Totally agree.
Oh,
And I think whatever the secondary rockets should be like some kind of like a light anti-vehicle lock-on only type of thing. Basically how they set it up in BF4.
No, Battlefield 4, I think, definitely had it right with the, yeah, so now we're going to go with the planes, because I love ground attack planes, but they never get much... Okay, that did not go well. Okay, I'll try again. But, you know, I like planes, and I love ground attack planes, but they never get much love. They're not as flashy as all the jet fighters, but, you know, they're just as necessary. So,
yes, absolutely.
We're going to use an A6 intruder, and I team killed like 2 people just taking off.
Sometimes you gotta make the worthy sacrifices.
You know, it's all for the greater good.
Yeah.
Okay, now we're orbiting the battle space, trying to ascertain what targets we want. Let's go with some anti-tank missiles to start off with. And there are no tanks for me to lock onto right now. So, for the moment, we're gonna use... Wait, okay, we got flares ready, we got rockets. Let's go work with our rockets for the moment. Let's pull up the map, and we can see that the small, I think, harbor area that could definitely has an enemy presence. So, let's maneuver to attack that. And, you know, there we go. I think we got people. Okay, those are friendlies. My bad. Okay, no, I think we killed everyone. I'm serious, I think we killed... Look, there's only 2 people left. I wasn't even paying attention. We've won. We've practically won. Now it's just hunt down the Nazi.
Hell of an attack run, but... You've won the game.
Oh, there it is. It's so beautiful.
Tactical nuke incoming.
I think I downloaded a nuke mod yesterday. I should see if I can find it in a bit.
That'd be awesome.
Yeah, there was mods for Fallout weapons for this game. It's the best.
That sounds insane.
Dude, I always loved the really diesel punk retro-futuristic aesthetic of Fallout, and I was low-key disappointed there was never a multiplayer FPS in the style of Battlefield for that game. Because,
right.
You know, Fallout as a franchise always has, like, and to me it has such a great appeal because it's like a more grounded version of all the science fiction that our parents and grandparents grew up with.
Yes. Yeah, no, it's got tons of appeal to me. I think it looks really cool. I would have loved to have seen, like, if they ever did another futuristic Battlefield, like, say they did 2143 or something like that, just one day. I don't know if they ever would, just because I think super futuristic games are kind of unpopular. At least at the moment, I don't think it's as bad as it was when, like, Infinite Warfare came out, but I'm getting a little sidetracked on that. If they ever did decide to do that, I think, like, this grounded, gritty type of... like what you're describing, like with the way Fallout does the future and everything, I think that'd be a really cool way to go about it.
Yeah,
I don't know how fitting it would be with the lore, but
we'll see. I mean, honestly, yeah, you know, we'll get to that. I want to say I'm glad you brought up Infinite Warfare because if there's one thing I really despise, it's Infinite Warfare's art style for futuristic stuff.
Same.
The fact that you have like these near interstellar starships going into space, but they have freaking chemtrail rockets. Conspiracy theory chemtrails going up just irks me so hard. I'm sorry.
Oh no, I get it, dude. My mom is like an astronomy professor, so she's been all about space my entire life. And like we'll be watching Star Wars, and she's like, "Why is there fire in space?" And she loves Star Wars, but she's like, "There shouldn't be fire in space. It doesn't make any sense." Like she'll just go through all the details about it, and so like whenever I see something like an Infinite Warfare, like obviously it doesn't have the nostalgic appeal that a Star Wars or a Star Trek or even something like Guardians of the Galaxy would have. It's just like I does not appeal to me. Like it feels like you're trying to be one of those things, but you can't capture it the same way because everyone knows it's A, not gritty, and B, it's not as cool as the other things we've grown up with already.
Yeah, I mean, I think in general Call of Duty, because it's the market leader, has to go for as wide an appeal as possible. But that's not to say wide appeal cannot be stupid, right?
Yes. Yeah, we got a couple of examples of that this year, I think.
Yeah. All right, so this is the last scenario I want to showcase. So this also is my world building, and it's a Okay, and for the inspiration for this is that I do have my alternative Cold War timeline, but around I started working on it in my first year of college, and it was in this first spring semester I had. I started playing Battlefield 4 again, and I remembered how good the game was. So I decided to write up a secondary story talk that basically justified how I could have Battlefield 4 hardware blowing up Nazis and fascists. So that's my world building, and this is how I sort of recreated it. So in this fictional timeline, we have Chinese airborne troops deploying in the Ural Mountains against, well, what normally would have been Germans, but I decided to go with French just because the skins seem more appropriate as part of the opening offensive in what they would call the continuation war, but what we would call the end of the Second World War. So
I dig it.
You'll see how this turns out. Let me find what's appropriate for it.
I like it.
And when this is let's see how this turns out if I make things asymmetric. Because these guys are not expected to survive.
You are not expected to survive.
Oh yes, that was a great intro for Battlefield 1. That is probably the best FPS intro I've ever seen.
Dude, it gave me so many chills the first time I saw it. Like, I remember the YouTube videos dropping, and that was like the little PTSD thing that the guy went through, and then the you are not expected to survive. It was just like, oh, so good. It just set the tone so perfectly.
Forget like horoscopes. Did you shoot the guy who was like breaking down when you were in the tank? That's like the real test.
That's what. I don't know. You've been following my channel for a long time, so you probably saw that video. But that was one of the things that I mentioned in like what Battlefield 6 needs to learn from Battlefield 1. I'm like, you need to make these interesting gameplay choices like a part of the game, and I use that as like an example. Personally, I've done both. I think the first time I did it, I spared him just because I felt bad. I'm like, oh shit, I could die like any second. I've already died like 3 times. Let's let this guy go. But I just think that was like such a... It was such a unique aspect to that game. Like, what other games really make you make those not super impactful, but they kind of tell you about yourself type of choices?
Yeah.
Yeah, like even I don't even think Modern Warfare 2019 did that kind of a thing.
I said Call of Duty's market leader. They can't do that kind of thing, but
yeah, for sure.
You know, honestly, I always maintained that Battlefield 1 would have been a lot more fun if it had far more of a sandbox element. But I've moderated my view on that slightly because I've realized that in some ways it was worthwhile for DICE to see if it was realistic to go for a more constrained style. As it turns out, that's not really ideal, but it was still a worthwhile experiment, and it would only have been a realistic experiment for a World War I game, because doing something like that where it was a lot more constrained in a modern title would have been unacceptable. Like, in general, Battlefield 1 is not my favorite Battlefield game, but it is by far the definitive Battlefield game for an immersive experience.
Absolutely.
There is no... Absolutely. The second is Battlefield 3, but it's a huge margin. It's not even, like, it's a freaking cliff of a margin. It's not even anything approachable.
Yeah. So, definitely a lot less ridiculous stuff that you can do. But, I mean, like you said, it's super immersive. But I will say there is some attempt at, like, obviously you have, like, the pickups and everything like that, the elites and stuff. It's not quite the same as the, like, BF4 Battlefield pickups. But, of course, you're selecting vehicles from a menu, which, again, I guess you wouldn't have, you know, a lot of those vehicles just spawn in the back at a base and just drive them forward, necessarily. You deploy miles and miles away and drive to the front, and you'd be there like that. Whereas, you know, BF3, you're just taking off in a jet right there, kind of that close quarters, close combat air support, I guess, is the best terminology for that.
Yeah, you know what? Honestly, jets have a hard time fitting in Battlefield. I don't think the jets have had a clear understanding. I don't think DICE has a clear understanding what they want their air power to do since Battlefield 2, really. And we're kind of seeing the issues of grappling with that disjointed identity ever since.
Yeah. Well, because it feels like sometimes they're way too underpowered or they're way too overpowered, especially like in the games that don't have helicopters. Because to me, the modern games, like, most of the air power is defined by the helicopters. Like, that's just what you're going to encounter the most.
The helicopters are so key to, like, Battlefield as it plays that we saw Battlefield 1 and 5. We saw the detriment to the gameplay when we didn't have helicopter analogs. But the thing is, with Battlefield 1, it didn't have to be that way because the airships could have been a great replacement for helicopters. But in the base game, they only had the Behemoth, even though in reality, you had a lot more common, smaller airships. Like the Naval was Turning Tides DLC. You had actual functional CAS airships, but they weren't available because they're DLC content, and it's I don't know.
Yeah, no, I think they could have made those a little bit more viable, just for people to get into. Even if it was like different kinds of airships, like you have your little scout balloons, like people would go up inside of those things in real life, and they would scout, and then you better hope no one shoots that thing, because you're gonna go up in flames. Among other ways they tried to see into enemy trenches and see enemy lines, but it could have been a lot more useful, I think, than adding something like the Ilya Myromets. I think that very much hurts how Battlefield 1 has aged, because you just get into a bunch of operation servers, and here comes an Ilya just bombing the whole front line, and it's just not...
Yeah, I mean...
not fun.
Battlefield 1, to me, I think the most painful thing for me is that there's so much missed opportunity in that game. Now, I get it. You know, World War I was a huge conflict, and DICE had to be really restricted in their approach. So I get it, but I really feel kind of unhappy still, just knowing all the cool stuff they could have added and that they didn't.
Right.
I mean, I think while, the French, I think, is a really good example, because while you could argue that by getting their own DLC, they got better emphasis than they could have had as a base game faction, it still really feels like we missed out by not having them in base game. And the fact that the show shot, the most produced automatic weapon of the war, was a DLC weapon, and not even like a live service, but like an actual paid DLC weapon, is, for a World War I game, that's definitely not an ideal outcome.
No, not ideal at all. I think there was a lot of missed opportunity with it, also with how they kind of cut the life cycle short. Because I remember the last two DLCs released like back-to-back months. Dude. Like I think it was the last Turning Tides one, and then the next month was Apocalypse.
Dude, Apocalypse really makes me unhappy, because I think, honestly, that was like Battlefield 1 in some ways. When it's not going for all-out warfare, that was Battlefield 1 at its best. But it was also the DLC that had like the least amount of content. And it's just so painful, because it has the best maps, it has the best vibes, it has a really cool soundtrack. Like the maps,
I love the soundtrack.
I'm so unhappy that the maps, like, dude, freaking Caporetto, it played like ass, but it was so beautiful to play on that you forgave for playing like ass.
Yeah, for sure.
The gas projectors, I mean, Apocalypse had stuff that's so great and so quintessentially World War I, that it should have been what the vanilla game was like, right? Because a lot of people complained that Battlefield 1 played more like a World War II game, and justifiably so. But if it played like Apocalypse from the get-go, they would not have been making those comparisons.
Yeah, because I feel like so much of Apocalypse added to just the hopelessness of the war. I mean, Apocalypse was the DLC I was looking forward to from the very announcement of the game. The promo art that they were showing of it, just like the fire and the dude's gas mask and everything like that, I was like, oh my god, we're gonna get some awesome stuff. I was thinking, like, in my head, I was like, we're probably gonna get like some kind of underground, like, trench warfare type of deal, like a Operation Metro but with trenches.
Oh, that would have been
like that would have been sick. But they just, I feel like they rushed it out when they could have just given us a whole extra year.
They rushed out because of Battlefield
1. Yeah, and then they just crap out Battlefield 5, and no one cared. We're like, we still got awesome as fuck Battlefield 1. Why am I gonna go play this?
Battlefield honestly should be on 3-year development cycle, because here's the thing. Here, I'll finish up with some like final thoughts. Like with Battlefield 1, the DLC I was looking forward to the most was Turning Tides. And on like the two maps where you actually had destroyers, it was the best naval combat in the franchise since 1942. But it was basically like the only naval combat on Frostbite, because the riverboat, like the patrol boats in Battlefield 4, were basically just river. It was basically river combat. It wasn't like actual naval warfare, unfortunately.
Right. Yeah, you didn't have any like big ass destroyers coming in or anything like that, trying to take each other out.
Yeah, I mean, I hope we
so
see
cool to see two dreadnoughts go at each other.
And that's part of the things. Like in some ways, I'm kind of. I think in the end, the live service or the premium model kind of ended up hurting Battlefield 1 more than it helped. Because there were so many cool ideas. Battlefield always has the coolest ideas and the best content in the DLCs, but because it's been on a premium model, it's always been locked away, right?
Yep.
That's the big unfortunate thing. That's the unfortunate truth, because Final Stand in Battlefield 4, Endgame in Battlefield 3, Armored Kill in Battlefield 3, Turning Tides, Apocalypse, that is honestly better content than the base game. But like 10% of people play it because of it. So it's... I'm completely lost on this map. I have no clue where any of the fighting is.
It's a big map.
Yeah.
It's somewhere. Just start shooting.
Okay, I think I see some fire bases, and there's the dam I was deploying on. You know what? Yeah, so with Battlefield 5, honestly, like I have mixed opinions on Battlefield 2042, but I have ultra mixed opinions on Battlefield 5.
Yeah.
If I have mixed opinions on Battlefield 2042, then my opinions on Battlefield 5 are like a statistical mechanics textbook. They are. It's okay, so here's the thing. I think Battlefield let's not ignore the obvious. Battlefield 5 had a ton of bad press, and I'm in the boat that a lot of it was justified and a lot of it was unjustified. So to start off with the justified stuff, I was there. I watched the live reveal on good internet. That trailer was trash. That trailer was so trash.
Very same.
I'm sorry. Like it was, and here's the thing. As it turns out, from like what I read, it wasn't even a real trailer with like assets. It was a CGI render thrown together because they literally did not have enough assets modeled and prepared in game yet by that point. So it started off with like bad press from stuff that wasn't going to be in the game anyway. So that's
just incredible marketing. Just can't beat it.
But on the other hand, for the unjustified stuff, it became very apparent that a lot of the bad press that kind of followed Battlefield 5, despite its even with its mistakes, came from basically bad actors like bigots and all that. Which, for me, like as a minority, that's definitely not something I'm approving of. And I mean, I won't say it hurt to kind of see that the Battlefield community had kind of become like that, but it was definitely not a pleasing experience, right? Because you always like to think, hey, you know, this isn't Rising Storm 2. I don't get called slurs or I don't hear anti-Semitism in the service, so it must be good. But that's not the case. And it just basically made an already non-ideal situation far, far worse than it had to be.
Yeah.
And that's just like... So what are your thoughts?
Well, I was going to say, like, there's a couple of ways they should have gone about it that I think would have been better. Because personally, I don't care about, like, you know, women in the game or anything like that. I do think that if you're portraying the Germans, I don't know that you should have minorities play as the Germans just because of historically what they were and what they stood for. So that just would be really weird. For anyone who has a general knowledge of World War II, but for the Allies, I mean, just think about how vast the Allies pulled troops from. Like, you would have such an assortment of people that contributed to the war effort to defeat that kind of evil. I think honestly, it almost should have been in the game. My only issue with the cosmetics, for example, was they didn't go with authentic cosmetics. They went with like these weird, like canvasy base uniforms. The colors weren't right. Like the Germans were wearing.
It was I think your audio cut out. Hey, your audio. I'm not receiving audio.
Hold on, let me.
Okay, I can hear you now.
Okay, Discord like froze for a second.
Discord is just a pain. I believe you.
Yeah. But as I was saying, I was like, my real issue with the game was just like the cosmetic approach and how it didn't try to portray really any authentic World War II cosmetics. Like the uniforms looked like a canvasy material instead of wool. They had like the colors of the uniforms up for whatever reason. All the like epic uniforms were, you know, leather jackets for the Germans, which they had, but not in that abundance. The British had just weird stuff. I think they could have made a ton of money if they just looked at pictures from the war and said, yeah, let's put that in the game. Because there's a lot of cool stuff. Like, you see reenactors and stuff all the time try to do that kind of thing. They had made a killing just off of people that enjoy World War II uniforms and stuff like that. Not to mention people that just actually want to be immersed in something that feels like World War II in a similar way to how they did Battlefield 1.
I mean,
so I think there was a big missed opportunity there.
Dude, I totally believe, like, one of the things I always kind of wanted to do was, like, recreate Battlefield 1-esque soldiers in Battlefield 5, because so much World War 1 gear was used in that war. But it's only until the very end that you could even do that, and it wasn't even that great. And here's the thing, to me, like, in some ways, Battlefield 5 almost felt like a 1950s war game as opposed to a 1940s war game. Now, of course, like,
couldn't agree more.
Like, technology's a lot in the 40s was a lot more advanced than, like, what we thought, so in some ways it was just going to happen eventually. But even then, I mean, Battlefield 4, like, Battlefield 5 is such a painful thing, because there's, I mean, I don't know. Here's the thing. Do you know that, like, on the American faction, they still don't have an Asian man you can select? They have no Asian characters, even though, like, there were tons of Filipinos and, like, Chinese army dudes involved. And that kind of miffed me, because I was kind of hoping that you might be able to play as an Asian American, right? Since, you know, they existed.
Well, I mean, they had Japanese American companies
in
in the European theater.
They're like the most decorated American soldiers in history are like Japanese Americans, and we still couldn't get them.
Yeah, okay, get them in the game. Like, I don't like, how do you not get that in there? You already have a Japanese faction in the game. Just put some of the faces on the American side. Like, the uniform is going to be what looks different.
Yeah, I mean, I think that probably is why, because, like, DICE probably didn't want people to get confused. But at the same time, the color scheme was so clear between the factions, right? The Germans were gray, the British were khaki, the Americans were gray-green, and the Japanese were tan yellow. That was always very clear, so I don't understand that, but...
Yeah.
Okay, let's see. We don't like we don't like the cosmetics. We don't like the way I know part of the reason why the cosmetics suck too is because they were so rushed on content and stuff. The development hell was like it was completely bad. That was a big part of it. And the attrition. Oh my god, that was here's the thing.
I can't stand attrition.
I've said it before, but no comments, but I'll say it on air. I completely respect and appreciate the fact that DICE decided to experiment with MilSim. Like, I totally give them props for that, and I hope they never do it again.
Totally agree. 100% agree.
Because, no shit, the Battlefield franchise does need to know if MilSim is a realistic direction or not. And DICE, to their credit, decide to experiment. And as it turns out, MilSim is not what the Battlefield franchise needs.
Right. Completely agree.
Okay, if you go on my Battlefield track, you'll see that my most played class is Medic. You wanna know why? It's because you don't have your freaking health cap off arbitrarily is why.
Yes. Same. It's just the play on easy mode class.
As in, you're not getting it's the problem with, like, the health attrition is that you get punished for playing the objective. If you take, like, some shrapnel or something, right, that automatically caps out your maximum health. And look, blueberries are blueberries. They're not going to give you ammo. They're not going to give you medicine. They're not even going to give you suppressive fire. Asking FPS players to give you suppressive fire is like a lost cause anyway. DICE seriously overestimated in some ways how smart the average Battlefield player was when they designed Battlefield 5. They also underestimated how tolerant, or they also underestimated how racist too, but that's, we discussed it. So, Battlefield 5 is basically in some ways, it's the epitome of designing, like, good theory, and then seeing how that theory totally conflicts with real life.
Yes. A lot of good ideas. I said it even during its life cycle, like when I first started doing YouTube. I was like, there's a lot of good ideas in Battlefield 5. They're just executed very poorly. Is all.
And here, I'm sorry, you brought that up, and I saw a post like 2 days ago on Pilots of Battlefield, the subreddit, where a guy was talking about leveling up his planes. I absolutely despise the vehicle balance in Battlefield 5 with so much. It actually infuriates me because I get it. I understand wanting to differentiate the factions, unlike Battlefield 4 and Battlefield 3. I understand wanting to give unique vehicles that play to their strengths. But the problem is you have so much less room for error in balancing things that even, like, a marginal difference ruins things completely. For instance, Panzerstorm. I had an unupgraded Greyhound because you obviously have to grind for it. You don't get attachments or perks to begin with, so you're by default weaker. I literally drove in circles around a Tiger 1 tank, shooting at 90 degrees into the engine compartment from the rear. I did everything by the book that I should have done as a light, mobile, armored vehicle going up against that thing. I still lost because of the inherent imbalance meant that they could do a lot more wrong and still kill me and than I could. And that just
Yep.
the fact you don't have situations like that in Battlefield 1. You don't have situations like that in Battlefield now with Battlefield 1 because they restrict you so much anyway. You don't have that with Battlefield 4. You don't really have it as much with Battlefield 3 because at least it's the same statistics for every side. You don't have situations like that with Battlefield 2042 to the same extent. It's kind of like Battlefield 3 that case. It's only in Battlefield 5 where you could do the right thing exactly as you're supposed to and still lose.
Yep. Abso-freaking-lutely. I didn't spend too much time in the vehicles because, especially like as a console player, most of the time your vehicle players are just kind of chilling away in the back, sniping with their tanks because they balance them that way. I don't know why. They literally teach you how to tank snipe in the in the test range. That's their tutorial is, hey, sit up on this hill and shoot from really far away.
I forgot about the test range.
Yeah, there's a bare bones test range that teaches you how to play in a very non-team oriented fashion. Because, the most team oriented, we're going to force you to play as a team together as much as possible game is like, except in tanks, don't do that. Sit on this hill, shoot from really far away. The vehicles in that game just, like you kind of touched on, the balancing, number one, makes zero sense. Certain things win in ways that just don't make any sense, and then other things like your Zero bombers in the Pacific, they just destroy the entire server. And it doesn't take, spend 5 minutes with them, you get a few unlocks. I mean, as long as you're a competent pilot, you can wreck some people in one of those things. Like, it doesn't take much. But then with the Corsairs and whatnot, you still have that to some extent, but you got to be a little bit better. It's very inconsistently balanced on either side.
The Pacific, I am so glad you brought up the aircraft balancing in the Pacific because the aircraft balancing in the Pacific took everything that was already bad about aircraft in base game Battlefield 5 and just made it even worse.
Yep.
Absolutely. I'm a huge plane guy. Well, I'm not the best at planes and helicopters, but I'm a huge vehicle guy, and Battlefield 2042, I honestly think, even with all the flaws, still does vehicles better than Battlefield 5. And I'm not saying that for the benefit of Battlefield 2042. It's just going to show how bad things are implemented with Battlefield 5.
Yes. Completely agree.
Okay, so I got a scenario. I want to demonstrate. This is based off a short novella I wrote in my senior year of high school this is when I was still really big into Battlefield 1. About a pseudo-Slavic country in early industrialization fighting against an empire that uses magic and medieval weapons.
This is going to be fun.
Yeah, so I got a map picked out for it, but I got to reverse the flag setup in order for it to work. So it's going to take a little bit. But this is one of the things I love about Ravenfield is that you can take any scenario you want, and if you have the mods available for it, you can recreate it. So for people do world building, people who just want to, do things that Portal won't let you, and if you don't have the PC hardware to do it, it's great. Dude, the fact, here's the thing. Dude, on Battlefield 5, you could have a 5950X maxed out, and it still won't guarantee you a stable frame rate. It's, yeah.
Very well optimized game. I still get horrible variable resolutions on my Series X. Like on my Xbox One X before I upgraded, I was still kind of iffy about it, but I figured on my Series X it'd be running crispy. But every time I record footage of it, it looks like it's in 720p sometimes, when the action picks up. If I'm holding still, it's fine. If I the game just started, totally fine. Looks great. As soon as I get near some action, it's here's some 480p at 35 frames per second. I'm like, why? I have I thought they patched it so it would work better. Battlefield 1 doesn't have this problem. Battlefield 1 looks beautiful on here.
All right. So I want to. Yeah, I mean, I agree. So I got a question for you here, right? What kind
Yeah.
of role do you want me to play in this pseudo World War One style? Do you want me to be a machine gunner, an assault trooper, an engineer?
I like the machine gunner. I'm a
All,
sucker for the machine guns.
all right, we'll be a pseudo realistic machine gunner. And I like one thing you can do with Ravenfield that you couldn't in Battlefield One is create an actual engineer class.
I see. I always wondered why there wasn't an engineer class, because
Well, there
like
was.
the
You just couldn't spawn in one unless you were in a vehicle.
well, right, yeah, that's what I what I really mean. I like because you have things like the Royal Engineers and everything like that, which played pretty big roles at places like Mons and whatnot. I would have thought. I mean, it's not game breaking or anything. Obviously, you can kind of do that in the tanks, and there's no fortifications or anything like that in the game. So, uh, I imagine maybe that's where that idea came from, but
Yeah. You know,
it works.
I want to ask you a question about a relatively unique topic about what's your opinion of like artillery in a battlefield game? And I'm talking about everything from like the big guns to light things like mortars. Do you think they belong? And if so, how should they be implemented?
Ooh. See, I'm not a big fan of, like indirect fire type of stuff necessarily. I feel like the way the artillery strike was implemented in Battlefield 5, I thought that was fine because I felt like you earned the right to have something that powerful. Your squad had to play well enough to get the points to do that. And you could be used, or it could be used in a pretty kind of thoughtful, strategic manner. Like you weren't just spamming it everywhere. You do it one at a time. To me, the mortars are just purely a nuisance, or just kind of that smaller indirect fire that anyone can just grab it and they can just be a complete nuisance in something like operations or rush, where they're basically sitting in the back and just bombing you from really far away. I feel like that takes a lot less skill. It's kind of like the frustration mechanics that I've talked about. Um, Now there are some cool ones like the howitzers in Battlefield One. I feel like because of how limited it is, I mean, it's just kind of like I'm not gonna get mad because a guy gets, he just shoots me from really far away with a howitzer that's there for like immersive purposes. It's kind of like, yeah, it's whatever. It's part of the battlefield. Kind of expect that. So I guess you can say the bigger artillery, as long as it takes some level of skill or it's not something that can be spammed like crazy, um, I'm fine with it. It's just kind of the smaller stuff feels like it's there just to annoy people.
Yeah, that's
If that
okay.
makes
Yeah,
sense. I
I
don't know
would
how
say
coherent I was.
I would say that I'm actually supportive of things like artillery in a battlefield, but again, it has to be implemented well, which it's not a controversial. I'll put it this way: I think Battlefield 3 handled mortars the best and the fairest.
Mm.
And I think, and I like the heavy mortar in Battlefield 1, the explosive one, and they should not have had
Yeah.
airburst mortar. They should just have the heavy mortar, and maybe given it some more range to compensate. But Battlefield 1 had too many airburst weapons, and I think that's probably why there's a lot of sentiment against indirect fire weapons. Justifiably so because of how little skill airburst weapons tank, right?
Yes.
I absolutely adore with all my heart the field guns in Battlefield 1. I think those were quite seriously like the coolest emplacements and most useful emplacements we've ever had in a Battlefield game.
They were awesome.
Who wouldn't, dude? It's a freaking field gun. We're talking about a type of, the one of the great things I'll always respect Battlefield 1 for is making mainstream in video games stuff you could never play in a mainstream video game before. You'd have to go to some indie game on Steam for it, right? Horses,
Yes.
they handled like ass, but you got to use actual horses, right?
Yeah, and they were pretty good. They're pretty good right now, even.
Yeah,
They're not maneuverable like you said, but I mean, if you can make some good plays with them.
you can. I disagree with their philosophy of how they did things for like in terms of controlling horses, but if you got good with the horses, because I was for like a period of 2 weeks, they were absolutely orgasmic to use. And I'm not
Yeah.
right. You could do some
Yeah.
amazing stuff with horses, and especially on Caporetto. And I love, yeah, as I said, Battlefield 1. I disagree with the limitations it forces, but I will give it credit. It does execute things well enough the way you would have to do so if you limit things that much.
Yeah. Yeah, Battlefield 1's a good example of good ideas with mostly good execution. There's, like you said, there's some missed opportunities, but for the most part, it's like they took an action movie and just made it a game. They're like, hey, you want to fire off a field gun? Go right ahead. You want to fly in a giant airship? Go ahead, do it. Have fun, have a blast.
Not just any action movie, but a good action movie too. It's not some tasteless drivel that you get in most Hollywood. Okay, I'm sorry, I'm just getting ragdolled to hell right now, but it's okay. Hold on, I'm sorry, but oh, I love the G95 in Battlefield 1. That was probably my favorite bolt action rifle.
Oh, it's great
because it was viable up close too. I know people give the sweet spot in like bolt action rifles a lot of shit in Battlefield 1, but in my opinion, that was the only game where they were actually viable to use, like on their own. As in, it was an even trade between using that and an MP18. I don't think ever since that's the only game where it's viable to use bolt action. And I can understand the annoyance of the sweet spot, and I think in general they should have gone with basically the Gewehr 95 model, where you just have high damage at all range, but no one-hit kill damage. That's what they should have done.
Well, honestly, I think that's why Battlefield 5, I mean, they kind of went with that model. If I'm going to praise anything in BF5, the sniping is pretty on point in that game. It's not too punishing if you're, like, moving, but you basically got to get headshots.
Yeah, I would agree. I said my only caveat is I think the minimum damage should be much higher, but it was, but as practically speaking, it wasn't really a big deal because the multipliers were a lot less punishing to boot.
Right.
And I actually like the high muzzle velocities in 1 and 5. I think honestly with 2042 and 3 and 4, the muzzle velocities overall were too slow. But I think that was to balance out the fact that they had much faster time to kill as well. So it might just not be pure antagonism.
Right. Yeah. They...
So any other topics of discussion with Battlefield 5 you'd like to bring up?
What else was there? I wish that we had gotten some kind of like Eastern Front content. That would have been nice, considering we got a little tease of it there towards the end of its life cycle. As much as I wasn't totally enjoying the game throughout its life, I think some of the post-launch content, for what it was pretty good, for all intents and purposes.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I agree. I was actually really hyping up for the possibility of a Eastern Front thing, because things like what was it, Mercury map and the Pacific update showed you how good Battlefield 5 could be once the post-launch dev cycle kicked in, because that stuff was good. Because with the post-launch cycle, post-launch content's always better than base game content, because by then the devs know how people actually play the game. So when the devs finally figured out how people actually played Battlefield 5 and designed around it, you got awesome stuff like the Pacific, aside from the air vehicles.
Right.
But the LVT was cool. The Sherman was cool. You got things like Operation Underground, which was, although I still prefer Metro, it's a lot better balanced than Metro. You got the summer update that had like the redo of that French map, that adding Americans to the European front. That was cool.
That was awesome.
For me, I don't know. Looking back, yeah, I think we're pretty much in agreement on Battlefield 5. There's a lot of, if Battlefield 1 had missed opportunity, Battlefield 5 had squandered opportunity.
Yes. Well, I think part of it's almost soured even more that they cut the support early on really both of those games, if you think about it. I know they didn't promise anything extra for Battlefield 1, but it just felt like the way they ended it was like, all right, let's just get it out so we can finish BF5, which they ultimately didn't do. Anyway, with the way 2042 is launched, even though they said, oh, we're cutting support for BF5 early to focus on 2042, we're bringing in these other teams to help with 2040. This next game is going to be everything we need it to be. And then it's launched in the way that it's launched. It's really made the ending of BF5 even more sour, in my opinion. For as many gripes as I have with the game. I feel like it deserved a little bit more of a shot, especially towards the end.
You know,
which
now
we've already.
I agree with you. You know, because here's the thing: I appreciate it. I appreciate every Battlefield game for what it is, regardless of whether or not I agree with all the philosophies in it. And then by the end, I appreciated Battlefield 5 for the unique take it offered. And even now, I'm kind of going, what if they added bots in multiplayer like they did in 2042 for Battlefield 5? You know, what if they did stuff like that? And because you can still find games, but that won't be the case eventually. Because Battlefield 5 definitely had its flaws, but I think, well, for two reasons. A, it's practically the last World War II game we're going to get for a while anyway. But I think DICE, by the end, had a functional product that they could have used for some World War II longevity. And I wish we could have had a lot of the sort of quality of life features like Portal that 2042 has available for Battlefield 5. Because although 2042 has like the 1942 stuff, I think it's still very different from a whole ass game.
Yes.
Also,
well, it's just a slice, and plus 1942 is such an archaic style game. I think a lot of people, because I never played 1942, obviously it was before my time. You know, I didn't play until Battlefield 3 was my first Battlefield, and even then I wasn't super into gaming yet. It was just like I played the campaign and I played a couple hours of multiplayer here and there, just like between school and work and everything. So I wasn't super into gaming. So I'd never tried 1942, and trying it in Portal for the first time, I was like, oh, this is like, you know, the medic can only do so much. There's only so much that you can do in terms of like health. The M1 Garand, you have to fire off all the shots before you reload. It's very archaic, which is fine. I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with that if you like 1942. Just for someone looking for a more up-to-date World War II type of experience that has the kind of distinct factions and everything like that, it's a bit underwhelming.
Yeah.
And I think that's the case with all the Portal game modes. It's just, you know, it's a tiny slice of... It's hard to describe. It almost feels like a Twilight Zone in a way. Mm-hmm. It's like, okay, you're telling me this is a Battlefield game that I like. For example, the Battlefield 3 stuff. This is a game that I'm nostalgic about. I really liked in the past. It looks beautiful on the new engine. But something is just off about it. Like, it feels like it is, but it isn't type of thing. Like, I'm waiting for, I don't know, some like in WandaVision where it turns out I'm in some made-up reality. And I'm like, oh, wait, it's Portal. It's actually 2042. Shit. Fuck.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you know, no matter, it's going to be hard to get fully immersed when the best you can do is 45 FPS, even though you meet the hardware requirements.
Yeah, when I can go on Battlefield 3 on my older PC right now and run at a steady 60 plus. Like, it's wild.
And there's like the gunplay. Honestly, you know what? I was really, after Battlefield 1, I really hated the concept of spread increase per shot because of how punishing it was in that game. But now, like, I've matured and I realized it has a place as long as it's not too excessive. And I 100% believe Battlefield 3 has the best gunplay in the franchise.
I agree. That's why, like, in the lead up to 2042, everyone's like, oh, I want BF5 gunplay. I'm like, oh, so you want everyone to laser each other across the field? Like, there needs to be some kind of a skill gap.
Battlefield 5, the gunplay, like, I appreciate the fact you didn't get punished as hard by spread because of the recoil conversion. But if you could just constantly just pull down mouse to compensate for all the spread, it felt really stale.
Yeah. Yeah. That's why everyone's like, oh, it's such a simple thing. Like, it's so easy. I'm like, there needs to be some kind of mechanic-driven skill gap. Battlefield 1 was too harsh. Battlefield 5 was too easy, in my opinion. And even then, you have things like the random recoil component because of the spread to recoil conversion, which... I feel like regular spread, like in Battlefield 3, it was just better. It just is more consistent. You can manage it to an extent. Obviously, it's not going to be perfect. But if you don't manage it, then you're going to be punished for it because you're not taking the time to actually get good with the gunplay.
Yeah, one thing I want to say about spread in Battlefield games is that with I think while Battlefield 1 spread was really punishing, because of how bright the tracers were, it was well communicated. But Battlefield 4, the spread was not well communicated at all, and with how many different sources could impact in that game, it could get pretty frustrating at times. I remember like times where I was standing still crouched for like several seconds, and I saw doing the distance, and I fire like my first 2 shots don't miss them because of like the suppression reset and all that. So Battlefield 4 definitely did not communicate spread well. Because in Battlefield 3 at least, it didn't do it as much either, but the traces were more visible, and because there was a much longer time to reset recoil, it didn't impact you as much. Battlefield.
Yeah.
Before we move on to Battlefield 1, I want to talk about let's talk about Battlefield 3 because we're talking about Battle Company 2 is like the one people always talk about. But to me, for where Battlefield is now, Battlefield 3 is the OG.
Yes.
So, what's your assessment of Battlefield 3? Try to leave off the rose-tinted goggles if you can, but if you can't take them off, no blame here because I'm having a hard time doing the same thing.
Yeah, no, I mean, it may be difficult because, like I said, I wasn't super into gaming quite yet, so there's some things I maybe don't have a complete grasp on. I have returned to it a little bit. I think one of the major things is the maps. A lot of the maps are still iconic to this day, like Sen Crossing, Metro, Firestorm. I mean, you can go down the list. There's a bunch of iconic maps in BF3.
Well, that's because they're actually well-designed maps.
Exactly.
That's okay. Battlefield 3 had the best. The map design just worked a lot better. I don't even know what to say. It's night and day, even with Battlefield 4.
Yeah.
Sen Crossing theoretically should have been hell to play as an infantry. Tala Market theoretically should have been terribly to play on an infantry, but instead, they're the best infantry maps in the franchise, among the best.
Yes. Well, we even see it like up to BF1. I mean, Amiens is basically Sen Crossing, but you have a train going through the middle instead of a river. If you think about it, I mean, and that's one of the best maps in Battlefield 1. I mean, back then in BF3, it was like, oh shit, this is fucking... And the atmosphere, I feel like people also underestimate the atmosphere.
No,
Obviously, Battlefield 1,
they do.
in the newer technology, it's just so beautiful to look at, but Battlefield 3 has an incredible atmosphere. It is definitely... I don't think it beats BF1 because it is older, but...
No, you're absolutely
it's up there.
No, it is something. Okay, and this is going to sound controversial, but I know people hate the blue tint, but the blue tint did help with that atmosphere because it gave it a style to work with, right? It wasn't just generic military, early 2000s military FPS number 5001. It was Battlefield 3. You had the blue tint as you assaulted Tehran. You had the blue tint in the fighter jet. It was Battlefield 3 combined really well thought out modern combined arms gameplay with style.
Yes, absolutely. You knew you were playing Battlefield 3. You weren't going to confuse it with Modern Warfare 3 when they both came out. It was very, very distinct when you were playing either one. It's honestly amazing going back to actually try it on PC because obviously back then, I was playing on like a Xbox 360, so it wasn't quite up to par with the insanity that was the PC graphics. That's probably the biggest discrepancy between console and PC I think the franchise has seen in terms of visuals. I know BF4 kind of has it gruff as well, but not as bad as 360 to PC. BF3 on PC holds up against a lot of even brand new games, like some of the indie games out there. It looks really good still.
The textures are a bit flat. Honestly, like Battlefield 3 nowadays is still competitive just because of how well it runs on older hardware.
Yeah.
It's still competitive. It just doesn't have as much attention. I mean, it's still alive in Germany. Like, props to the Germans. They're keeping Battlefield 3 alive on PC. So
bless those European servers.
It's no, Battlefield 3 and Battlefield 3 does not have the best execution in any single category aside from map design, but as a complete package, it had good enough execution in all areas to make it the standout Battlefield game because it doesn't have the best atmosphere, but it does have the second best, and it doesn't have the best gameplay. Well, maybe it might actually now that I think on it, but it didn't have the most like futuristic gameplay or the most grounded gameplay, but it found a great middle ground between the two of them. It doesn't have, and it combined all the things you need for a good Battlefield game. And while it wasn't a it's like, I don't know how to put it. It's like, it's not a jack of all trades on the surface, but it does the jack of all trades so well it becomes an ace anyway, right?
Yeah. No, I know what you're saying. And I've had this thought before as well. I'm like, if you look at every game that comes after Battlefield 3, each one takes a piece of what Battlefield 3 does really well, and it does it extremely well. It just forgets all the other stuff that Battlefield 3 also does really well.
That's a great way. That's a perfect description for it.
Yeah, because like Battlefield 1, yeah, it has phenomenal atmosphere. Great atmosphere. It just doesn't have the depth or the gunplay or a lot of the other things that Battlefield 3 did. Even Battlefield 4 has a lot of the depth. It has the modern setting and everything like that, a lot of the variety people look for, but it doesn't have quite the atmosphere. Like, you don't feel like you're playing a movie necessarily. Like, you just like, this is just, it's Battlefield 4. It's distinct. It is what it is, but it doesn't feel as like kind of, I guess this actually sounds really weird, but mouth in the mud, as we used to call it. That being a mud cruncher and this, it feels like you're in a movie, but it has all these other things to offer as well, from map design. Battlefield 4 doesn't have the greatest map design across the board. Some of its best maps are the remakes from Battlefield 3, or at least ones that were inspired by Battlefield 3 maps. So, you go down the line and you can definitely see where each game has branched off of BF3, but never quite captured everything that it did.
Yeah. In some ways, I think 24-2 is almost kind of like DICE's attempt to recapture Battlefield 3, and we'll see if it turns out. But, I mean, Battlefield 3 is a classic, and I think in some ways it's underrated by the FPS market as a whole because it's an exemplar in execution.
Yes.
The only real criticism I could possibly have for Battlefield 3 is, well, I'll put it this way. A, is that so much of the really cool and innovative content is locked behind DLC, but that's just this era. That's just how things worked back then. I'd say B is just lack of naval combat. But, Battlefield 3 is about depicting a contemporary military conflict in Iran. So it's going to be kind of hard to do ocean combat anyway.
Yeah.
And because
you can't even really do river combat hardly. Because...
yeah, so that's it. But, it's hard-pressed for me to find criticisms about Battlefield 3 that aren't related to the fact it came out in 2011.
Yeah. Totally agree with you. For its era, it was pretty immaculate for what it offered. Just the depth, the weapon customization, you had various attachments, and each one served a purpose. You didn't have faction-locked weapons, but whenever you started the game, you have your starter weapon is basically your faction weapon. And I think that just kind of is like that initial kick into, there's some immersion here, but, unlock your favorite guns and fuck around.
That's the best approach, too, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, so Battlefield 4. I do want to get to Battlefield 24-2 eventually, but, we can't skip Battlefield 4 because that's... It's still a worthwhile game, right? So what's your assessment of Battlefield 4?
Battlefield 4, to me, and this is going to sound a lot harsher than I really mean it to sound, but it's basically just worse Battlefield 3.
Go on.
That's my assessment of it. It has some very cool thing. Obviously, it introduces Levolution. You got a really cool Easter egg community. It did add a lot to Battlefield and everything that you could do. It felt like it was missing the atmosphere that BF3 had. It felt like it was missing some of, like you mentioned earlier with the way the spread worked and how inconsistent it could be because you couldn't see the tracers and things like that. Like, it was just missing that little bit that would have put it up there with BF3. I think it's close. I think it's still one of the better installments in the franchise. I think it does a lot of things right. The sandbox is phenomenal. But certain map design is a little too open. Obviously, initial launch stuff such as balancing and the bugs and just the functionality of it was legendarily brutal, only to be beaten by the recent 2 installments somehow.
Mm-hmm.
It's it's a good game and it holds up, and there's a reason people still play it. It has tons of depth. I mean, there's honestly every time I pick it up and play it, I feel like I discover something completely new. Uh, Even in the lead up to 2042, I found a completely new favorite weapon. I just put the AN-94 in burst. I don't know why, it just works better that way. I like it. I feel like I was getting like basically collateral double kills with it like that. I was like, all right, well, I already like the AN-94. Now I love it.
You know, I don't want to interrupt you here, but there's a YouTuber named Darth Veda who used to do weapon and vehicle guides for Battlefield 4, and you should totally check out his channel, because I think he's active on Twitter, but he doesn't do videos now. But I think he's a real in-depth stat diving Battlefield YouTuber that definitely needs attention. But please continue otherwise.
Yeah, no, for sure. I'll definitely check him out. If you want to like link me his channel, or I can try to look it up.
Yeah, I can do that after the stream.
Yeah, no, sounds good. I'll check him out. But yeah, as I was saying, the game had pretty good balance. Once they patched and everything in the post-launch, I mean, it has tons of maps and tons of experiences to go and have, and obviously you have things like the whole Great White Shark Easter egg, or well, I guess it's a Megalodon Easter egg. You can get the dice skins, the dice camos. It was really like at a really nice turning point in gaming. Like in my mind, the era from like 2010 to like 2014 was such a golden era of gaming, not just in FPS, but just all across the board. And Battlefield 4 and Battlefield 3 fall right in there. I think it was just like this spot where it wasn't so overly chasing these trends, and it wasn't so analytical, that games were still focusing on trying to be the best version of themselves. And that's why you see the insane amount of depth and the really well mechanically driven gameplay that Battlefield 4 offers, especially with like vehicles. I mean, it is so hard to operate the vehicles in that game. Most of them, not all of them, but you know, there's your, of course, AA campers somewhere on the map ready to shoot down any pilot in the vicinity. But if you see a really good helicopter pilot, they didn't just pick it up and start dominating. Unlike in 2042, where I feel like I can just pick up a helicopter and yeah, I'm gonna die in like 2 minutes, but I'm gonna get 10 kills in that 2 minutes, like guaranteed.
Yeah.
So,
no, I really agree with your. I like your assessment of Battlefield 4. I would say for me, as you can tell by the fact I'm playing Gradenfield right now, I'm really huge on sandboxes and like player customization configurability. So I can give a lot of the drawbacks of Battlefield 4 compared to Battlefield 3 because of the fact it's basically, at the moment, it's at least tied with Battlefield 2042 in terms of being the most customizable Battlefield game in the franchise, right? That's because I mean, yeah, I don't know. You said it was so well. I don't really think there's anything realistic I can add to the assessment of Battlefield 4. It's kind of like the worst version of Battlefield 3, but with a better sandbox. But don't let that sound too harsh, right?
Right. It's like comparing. I don't know how into sports you are, but it's like having Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant. You know, both are legendary. One's just better than the other one.
Yeah, that's perfect. Yeah, that's fine. That's a good assessment. I mean, I will say that the DLCs aren't really as innovative as Battlefield 3's DLCs, aside from Final Stand.
Yeah, that one really went into like the, oh, we're about to go to the future type of stuff.
And then the DICE decanonized over Twitter. Not that I can blame them, but you know, it's I think they were kind of okay. You know, they didn't really know what was going on back then, so I can't blame them for making some inconsistencies. And I do appreciate the riverine craft of Battlefield 4 because it's not full naval combat, but it's nice to have fun with boats again.
Right. Yeah. No, it felt like a piece to the overall experience. Like, you can really feel it going between, like, say, Battlefield 1's base maps and then Battlefield 3, which really doesn't have any naval combat. When you go to Battlefield 4, you feel that addition, that extra element to the overall gameplay. Like, there's something else to look out for, in a sense.
Yeah.
I think I put that okay. But, yeah, the naval combat just adds its own whole cool dimension, even if it is limited to just Rivercraft. Because I mean, really, aside from BF1, where you do have the dreadnoughts and everything like that, how big can you really go with the naval stuff? Like, if you have someone just roll up, like maybe you could have a commander mode where they call in a destroyer and he can like call in tactical strikes from there. But that would almost just be a more animated version of what the commander can basically already do in a way. So
Yeah,
I don't know.
I'll address this later on. Is that although I complain about the lack of naval combat, I understand it's not the easiest thing to implement because it is so complex. But that'll be in a while. So, but yeah,
Right.
no, that makes I mean, look, I have a lot of respect for Battlefield 4, and that's, I mean, as I said, it kind of re-inspired me to write up scenarios where you stomp on Nazis with military hardware, and it's led to a lot of fun in this game. So there's not much for me to blame there, even though I recognize the superior of Battlefield 3.
Right.
So for the next scenario I'm going to showcase in Ravenfield is going to be the second to last one, and this is the alternative Cold War universe, except in Vietnam, as in a different variant. I'm going to use this to kind of showcase another map here, another Battlefield map basically that's been ported more or less. Where's Wake Island? And I guess if you want, do you want to? I can use this as an opportunity to discuss naval combat in the Battlefield franchise in general.
Yeah, I'm down to go in depth with the naval combat.
Because I want to have a lot of time for 24-2, but we got to make sure we cover all our bases going into it. So,
right, of course.
Yeah, so we'll use this as the sort of naval. What was it? This is my knockoff version of Naval Strike for the moment. All right, so with what was I going to say? Okay, actually, so what weapon? Why don't you pick out my weapons for me this time? At least on my first spawn. So in this world-building scenario, China's kind of fractured between the communists and nationalists, as in there's a ceasefire and technically a national government, but it's practically a confederacy. And the ones with international political connections are the Republicans, but the ones with domestic political popularity are the communists. So for the initial expeditionary force to Vietnam to fight against the French Empire, it's going to basically be the nationalists or / Republicans who use old American hardware and old German hardware. So
I mean, you got to go. I'm tempted to go with the Tommy gun, but the grease gun. I mean,
it's like they actually through the base game version I think has the grease. Yeah, this is actually a vanilla item and it's pretty good. I'm kind of disappointed about the fact that Battlefield 5 didn't have a M1A1 600 RPM Thompson.
Yeah. Same.
I was irked by that because it's such a classic. But you know what? I'll do two lives. I'll do an assault trooper with the M1A1 and I'll do an engineer with the greaser, and we can get both of that in.
That works for me.
All right, so I'm going to go with basically the Chinese national handgun. And let's go with, assault trooper. Unless, I think this sounds pretty appropriate. So I forgot how this goes. And usually, I've noticed in this game, aerial assaults and seaborne assaults are pretty difficult to pull off successfully. So,
oh boy,
we'll see how this goes. So in the world-building scenario, basically a bunch of diplomatic maneuvering by the United Nations, which is... Well, I don't know. I can send you the notes on the world building sometime, but the short story is, as a treaty to end American involvement in World War II, France gets to keep all its colonial properties around the world, but the Vietnamese still rise up against them. And what began as clandestine support from the United States and other United Nations countries to all actors in Vietnam fighting against the French has kind of coalesced into the Republican and the Communist factions, and the war gets messy as you'd expect. So but luckily this has been a great time for me to use all the sort of early Cold War military hardware mods. So in this scenario we're basically I think I chose the wrong seat. In this scenario, these are the first sort of Chinese troops to be deployed internationally to Vietnam, and I think they're Of course, this is Wake Island, but we can pretend that this is one of the islands in that part of the world where the
Right.
Chinese are going to, on behalf of the Vietnamese, take over some islands that are occupied by the French that, I don't know, maybe they have anti-air batteries intercepting American bombers or something. Who knows? They
Yeah,
got their
I can
orders, and let's be real, man. These guys are expendable. They're using old hardware. There's enough of them.
pretty much.
So let's see.
Pretty much.
Okay, there's a enemy tank. I'm not going to deal with that. I will say I don't want to assault the beach because with how aimbody the bots can get, it's definitely not an ideal proposition. So what I'll do instead is assault the barracks and the flags there. Then we're going to pull off some stunts with the helicopters. Use our momentum to our... Okay. Use the momentum to our advantage. Okay, that's not maneuver... Well, it maneuvered well enough. Take cover inside the house. The meter's not going down. There's probably tons of enemy bots. Oh, look, those guys deployed off a helicopter. And they're ragdolling all over the place.
I can't remember if I've seen it or not. Is there like small amounts of destruction in this game, or is there destruction in this game?
There's not really destruction in the base game, but I think some maps have small amounts of destruction.
Oh.
A lot of the people who played this are into Battlefield anyway, so this in some ways is kind of like the single player Battlefield experience of your dreams.
Right. Yeah. Because I know destruction's really hard to pull off just on its own, but I didn't know if they would have worked that into the mod or not.
I think the fact is that this is getting ported to a newer version of the Unity engine. I think it's going to be. I think it's either Unity or Unreal, but it is getting a big engine update that's in progress right now. So the mods in the future based on that might be able to allow it to work. But for the moment,
Could you imagine it on Unreal Engine 5 though?
well, you know what? Box models can work, and let's hope I
Yeah.
don't get shot up by the tank before my mortar strikes land.
That would be pain.
And I did. Well, it's okay, dog. We got air superiority for the moment.
Oh yeah, it would be alright.
Alright, so...
Oh, in the airstrike.
You know what? I'm going to respawn the carrier, and I'm going to use the mod for the Q5 attack jet that totally was not ripped off from Battlefield 4 by someone. It's totally...
I'm sure not.
It's totally not ripped off from Battlefield 4. Trust me, bro. Just trust me.
I'm sure it's absolutely original content.
It's absolutely, these models are, handcrafted by some dude in Blender. This is totally not a rip-off of Battlefield 4. That is totally not the Battlefield 4 Q5 radar screen right there. This is totally not. So, I was
Not it at all.
Some people may not be as original in recreating content, but, I'm glad it's available all the same.
Yeah. I mean, is this thing even paid for? If it's, I don't think it's, right? It's not paid. It's free, right?
The mods are free. The game obviously has a base cost of $17,
Right.
less on sale, but it's there's no paid mods. I don't think honestly, at least in PC gaming, the concept of paid mods are such blasphemy that it just gets shot down immediately, unless you're Bethesda and have Creation
Right.
Club.
Yeah. Freaking Bethesda. They're, but yeah, no, I figured the mods, yeah.
It's good to ask these questions because the modding is such a huge part of Ravenfield. So,
Yeah.
all right.
Yeah,
so,
I mean, I would imagine that's what keeps a game like this alive. You gotta bring in the variety.
I mean, honestly, you can have a lot of fun even with the vanilla content too, because it's a purer sandbox than even Battlefield will ever be able to offer, just because it's a bot, offline, single-player game.
Right.
But it works to its advantage, and okay, so I'm completely useless as an attack jet pilot, so let's find a flag for me to capture. Let's do some stunts. So yeah, you certainly don't keep your... Oh, are you serious? Okay, I'm sorry, man. You're not getting... You were promised good action, and you're not getting good action. So we'll get an M72 Law, and we'll try to deploy at least on a beach, and maybe not get blown up. We'll see how it turns out.
I
There we
like
go.
it.
I think that's a French guy. I can't tell. It doesn't matter if that's French or not. Oh yeah, and you can tell the 3D models are bugged because this is a beta branch, but you get some good. I love the Law as an anti-tank weapon. It's so cool, and I wish more games had it. The only one I know that really does it is Squad, and that's with the modernized version, which is fair, but It's so underrated.
Yeah.
Okay, we're actually taking fire from a tank over there.
Tank.
Okay, let me see. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention, you can actually lean in this game.
Oh wow, another feature not in 2042.
Yeah, I know. And some gun mods allow you to do ADS reloads.
Oh, that's nice. I will say the ADS reload is really, really nice. I've been thoroughly enjoying that, especially with like DMRs and stuff.
Battlefield, yeah, 2042 has some really great quality of life adjustments to the guns when it's not bugging out. And this assault is not going well at all. I think we lost the points we actually spawned with. It might be because of the asymmetry, but who knows, man. All right, let me try to. You know what? I can't not do this. You. I think I can fit all them all in this helicopter. Okay, I can. So. Yeah, with naval combat, I think with naval combat is a complex thing to implement in games in general, so I can understand why we definitely don't have it as a core feature in Battlefield, but I think Turning Tides, did the best balance between simplicity and depth. Because you only had the dreadnoughts and the destroyers and torpedo boats, only one of which was actually original aside from the smaller airships, but they were implemented with enough depth that you could have fun naval engagements as is. So I think with 2042, the fact that modern naval combat is really just destroyers and cruisers using guided missiles anyways, might be able to simplify even further for DICE. But the fact that 2042 takes place on, like, the home base is a destroyer, but you don't do any naval combat, feels kind of like a missed opportunity at the moment.
Oh yeah, it's honestly, I almost laugh at it whenever I boot it up because I just see the ship there and I'm like, that has zero relation to any of the gameplay. I mean, all that really has is like the story mode for Hazard Zone.
Yeah, I mean, it's. I would not be surprised if we actually do get naval combat in like a post year 1, like a year 2 season. But yeah, it doesn't need to be deep, right? Because Battlefield 4 naval combat was deep enough to be good for 2014, but ever since we saw what DICE could do with Turning Tides, it kind of showed that it's an area of the game they need to step up their game on that. But at the same time, it's a hard thing to do. So I hope it's there, but not too much sorrow if it isn't.
Well, I think also part of it has to do with, I think the base maps were made for specifically Hazard Zone, and because they want to capture more of that kind of BR or like escape royale type of thing. I don't think they wanted to include naval combat quite, because I mean, if you think about it, Hazard Zone in general is pretty dumbed down version of
Escape from Tarkov, right?
Yeah, like I feel like they felt they may have had a hard time adding naval into it, adding that extra dimension, and then having to balance it along with all the other stuff. Because if you look at something like the Bolt almost looks like an attack boat, but it has tank tracks on it. And it almost functions in a similar way. So it feels like they were like, oh, we'll just substitute that for what an attack boat would be. Like, yeah, that'll work. And I don't think anyone likes it, except for people that spam it. I would like to see naval combat. I would like to see the maps in general just facilitate more of something other than what's in the game right now. Like, the game right now only feels like it has one experience. I don't want to turn this into a rant about 2042.
We'll have plenty of time to rant, don't worry.
I want to see naval combat. I want to see the variety. I want to see the differentiating experiences. I want to see like an infantry only map. Do like a really fucking cool version of Manifest or something.
I want
infantry only.
We want to see the full promise of near future warfare. Not just the infantry and tanks and planes, but everything.
Yeah, I want to see all of it. And I don't think they'll ever include like full-on destroyers coming in, nuking the map, or anything like that. But some small. It could just be little dinghies with machine guns on them. I don't care. I just want to have that extra dimension that I can just go and grab in the big old sandbox you advertised. and go and experience that. And have fun with it. Because why not? Like, I feel like there's a lack of a fuck it mentality with 2042. Like, in Battlefield 3, Battlefield 4, Battlefield 1, kind of, I guess, the main ones you could say for players these days. There's the fuck it mentality in that, fuck it, I'm going to go and grab this and do this with it. I'm going to go and do this right now.
Yeah.
You can kind of have this freedom. It's more limited in some games than others, but you can just go and do something stupid for the sake of doing something stupid, or it could end up being something really smart for your team. Like, there's so many different ways to approach it that I don't feel like is in 2042. I feel like 2042 only offers, like, oh, look, I C5 jeeped, and
No,
that's like the extent of it.
you just illustrated a point that I've always felt but never articulated yet. Instead, here's the thing. Battlefield 2042 technically has the best sandbox in the franchise. But the problem is, it still has enough consequence that you aren't at liberty to fully experience that sandbox. Because
Right.
if you don't do it just right, it'll be too detrimental. You brought up such an important point right there that no one else has covered. That's a great insight. Like, I'm not trying to like yank your chain here because that's such an important thing. It's the difference between a fully realized sandbox and a theoretical sandbox. Because Battlefield 4 doesn't have as an extensive a sandbox, but the consequences for failure were far lower when you didn't use it as well.
Right.
In Battlefield 24 here, you're afraid of messing up even when you shouldn't have to be because of how stringent things can be, right? That's part of the Battlefield 5 influence.
Right. Right. It's like it's trying to... It punishes you just for moving. I mean, in some ways, I feel like they played Battlefield 4 for like 5 minutes, like on a test range or something, and they're like, okay, well, here's some popular funny things we can just toss in the game and call it a day, like shooting, and that gets you spotted on the minimap. And that sort of worked in BF4, but BF4 also had the issue of people are just reading their minimap the entire game. So then in future titles, they didn't have that. And I think Battlefield 1 definitely hit the sweet spot. Battlefield 5, towards the end of its life, hit the sweet spot a little bit, where you weren't spotted all the time. You weren't constantly punished just for shooting your gun unsuppressed, or in 2042's case, if you don't have a heavy suppressor on and you fire your gun, you're spotted. So even if you have a regular suppressor and you shoot your gun, within 20 meters, everyone still spots you.
Yeah.
I don't know why, along with the wall hack specialist, the Boris turret, which sees you through walls, and then the aimbot, which anyone can call in, and it'll shoot you too from anywhere. Like, you're punished for moving.
Yeah.
And that's a problem.
You know, we're talking on Battlefield 2042 now, so let's just get into it, right? Here, the thing is, one of the things I knew that was going to happen that I'm not surprised by is that Battlefield 2042 in a lot of ways is basically Battlefield 5 with the sandbox. In terms of its game design philosophy and all. You don't have attrition and you have the sandbox, but you can tell, like, with the way the vehicles are trying to be more realistic and stuff like that, you don't have the same consequence-free environment that 3 and 4 had. And even 1 had, to some extent. You have the consequences of 5, but they're trying to add in the elements that other games had. So it's a weird combination. Maybe it'll turn out to be better after they fix the game, but we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with you. I think it's, and I almost see it a lot to have to do with, like, the balancing and everything. Like, it feels as if they want to limit the skill gap, and that's why when you're trying to pull off a more complex play, it feels like you're punished so much harder, versus if you're just playing in a more general, I don't want to say casual sense, but you're more like kind of standard, oh, I'm just running forward to the objective. Like, you're going to get a pretty basic experience. And I think allowing people to embrace that skill gap, and if you decide to invest the time in the game, you should be rewarded for it, because that's, I mean, you want to keep playing in that case. I feel like 2042 and BF5 have that same issue, where it's like, oh, well, I don't want you to be this good, because then Timmy's going to feel bad about himself. He's not going to be happy because he doesn't think he has a chance to be the best player on the battlefield. I just feel like, kind of like what you said, there's such heavy consequences for something as little as shooting your gun. and everything is spotting you, everything is constantly punishing you. It's the same but different. And I really don't even know how they pulled that off. Because mechanically, the game doesn't encourage camping. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the camping here because I don't think anyone else is really talking about this. Mechanically, the game discourages camping. It has so much spotting. There's no prone-only weapons like we had in BF5. I mean, visibility really isn't bad at all, aside from the whole invisible soldier bug, which I don't know how that got into back-to-back games, but, you know, yay dice. It still has a camping problem because of the map design and because of how harshly it punishes you, again, for simple things like shooting or moving or not even doing anything, just someone has Jisoo Pike and they spot you through a wall. Or someone has Boris's turret and it spots you through a wall. And not only that, it shoots at you when it does spot you.
Yeah.
So it creates this scenario where people just don't want to move. They're like, if I do anything, if I move at all, I'm going to get just immediately caught in a hailstorm of bullets. So instead of prone-only bad visibility issues like we had in BF5, and that created a camping problem, now we have, if you move, you're dead, and that creates a camping problem because you don't want to move, because you don't want to die. You want to get some kills, but how am I going to get kills if I'm dead all the time?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, I'm not, I've said before, I'm not actually too opposed to the robotics and things, and I will say, but there is definitely a sensation of you're punished for playing the objective in some ways, quite frankly. But I think a lot of that does come down to pretty atrocious map design, because most of the breakthrough maps, at least on 64 players, which is the only playable version right now because of poor optimization on PC, is literally just open fields for like until you get from between your spawn and the first objective.
Yeah.
So what could have been balanced in terms of like Boris's turret and vehicles, like what would have been balanced with adequate cover, is instead a really lopsided situation because of map design. Because
I agree with you a lot there. A lot of it is the map design.
The map design feels like 2042, like the All Out War has really cool ideas for its maps, okay? You got the high-tech, high-rise city, you got the sandstorm place with slight suburb expansion, you got the rocket launch site with a big towering structure. So there's a lot of cool concepts, but the design does not do them justice. And map design is, next to gunplay, is the most fundamental thing in a shooter, in my opinion. And we're seeing the consequences of poor map design coming to fruition.
Yep. Well, I think, again, if you look at it and compare those maps to other maps, like maybe not quite Warzone's Verdansk or something like that. I haven't played the new one, so I don't really know how that one plays. But I guess the most similar, honestly, is the original Apex Legends map. Like, it feels like you have these small bits of cover that are designed for a squad to hide in. And then you have this open space that, in a more small squad mode like Hazard Zone, you have to decide if you want to move through that as a risk or take an alternate route that may have more cover. But with the massive 128-player modes or even 64-player modes, it just doesn't work because you have these mass groups of people trying to hide behind, like, a bush, and they just can't do it.
DICE,
and there's no aerial cover.
I'm so glad you're bringing up the influence of Hazard Zone in these things, because I don't buy into the theory that it was designed as a battle royale, but it is very clear that DICE overestimated the value of Hazard Zone to the detriment of All Out War in terms of how they approached game fundamentals.
Yeah,
because all these like issues we talked about, map design, open areas, and NX cover, aren't too punishing for Hazard Zone, but for 64 128 players, it's killer. And the fact, as it turns out, people don't like Hazard Zone because it turns out that most blueberries don't talk, not that there's a way to do so right now anyway, and that they're idiots who don't know how to play the game mode. Hazard Zone needs everything to go right for it to work well, and because if it works well, it will work well, but there's too many obstacles, and then they try to design everything around that and then port those ideas to large scale, and we're seeing how that doesn't work out.
Right. I think what they thought they could do, and obviously I don't know who's making the decisions on that, but like in Battlefield 1, the maps were mostly designed around operations, but a lot of them still worked for Conquest because operations takes a lot of concepts from Conquest and still applies them. It's just a little bit more linear. So some maps worked better than others, obviously, for both modes. Some worked great on both. Some worked only good on one or the other. But it still worked overall. With a game mode like Hazard Zone, it has almost no relation to Conquest or Breakthrough. So trying to jam that into those modes, it just doesn't work. The concepts of it, the way the game flows, it does not come together very well.
Yeah, and I want to talk in terms of map design. I think in some, this is fire. We got to bring up Firestorm at least once, because just because everyone else has forgotten about it, we shouldn't. And Firestorm really illustrates why these more unique game modes need their own maps. Because could you try imagining playing Battle Royale 64 players on any of the base game Battlefield 5 maps? Hamada?
It wouldn't work.
Hamada Battle Royale? That you gotta keep that. I'm sorry.
No, that wouldn't work.
So, here's the thing. Halvoy is a fantastic map, and I had so much fun in Firestorm when people still played it, just exploring the map, right?
Right.
Because here's the thing. Halvoy was made for Firestorm, and they did it well. Criterion did a fantastic job, and I think DICE fell a bit too much in the fall. They have one map for everything when they probably should have built either a unique world space or involved alternate versions of the maps for Hazard Zone, just because of how different it is. Because I can give the credit, at least with like Firestorm and Battle Royale in general, it's still large scale enough, right? You can have a lot of the same philosophies. So in some ways, I would say you could say that Firestorm would have had a better chance on base game Battlefield 5 maps than Hazard Zone would on base game 2042 maps, right? It's like an opposite scenario. Hazard Zone should have had the custom map. Firestorm should have been on base game, but that's not necessarily how things turned out.
Right. I think especially because, like, I mean, I liked Halvoy. I thought Firestorm was a solid Battle Royale as well. I don't really like Battle Royales in general, but I tried it for a little bit, and overall, for a Battle Royale, I thought it was pretty good. Needed some love, which it didn't get, and it should have been free to play, but I'm not in charge of those decisions. I do agree. I think 2042 needed unique maps for both Hazard Zone and All Out Warfare, whereas I think because you're almost limited with the 64 players in Battlefield 5, I think you could make it work. I mean, especially because of some of the places where the maps did converge. I mean, like you brought up with Hamada, could you imagine a circle coming together around the little castle area in the back? I mean, that'd be epic. People would love that. Even the one kind of in the middle of the map, I think where the D objective is, like between that and the kind of airfield area, there are definitely areas where, you could have had some circles come around and it could have created some interesting moments. And I don't think 64 players would have been too much. I think involving vehicles and whatnot could have been a little iffy. And I think that works better on Halvoy itself because they designed it for that. But I think I mostly agree with you on that one. We'll never know how it would have worked, unfortunately. Maybe in the future someone will mod it. We'll have like Battlefield 5 Royale.
Yeah, that's So yeah, I think that's really it. It's that I think DICE in some sense kind of stretched themselves a bit too thin when doing the map design for 2042, and it's bled into non-ideal experiences for both All Out Warfare and Hazard Zone.
Right.
Okay, so then I guess, what would you like to bring up with regards to 2042?
I'm not so sure about the future of the game. Honestly, I know a lot of people are saying, "Oh, it's gonna be, what they build off of it'll be fine in a year." But to me, between all the issues they're having currently and just not really having a player base, I don't think you're on Twitter, but I posted a tweet the other day because I play mostly with crossplay off. But I was trying to get into a portal to see like the different modes in the server browser, and with crossplay off, there was one server with 5 people in it.
Yeah, that's okay. That's still important information. I mean, this is probably where our opinions are going to diverge the most. Please continue. I really do want to hear this.
Yeah, no, and I'm not saying that is an indictment of the entire player. I'm not saying that there's only 100 people playing 2042 still, but I think between seeing that just for myself, I mean, obviously turning on crossplay, I can find plenty of servers. Getting a game is fine. It's just the servers are all PC players for the most part. Between that and then at the same time, Battlefield 5 having more players than 2042 on Steam for a couple of days, I don't know that even the people that can look past the bugs are going to still want to play this game when they do fix the bugs. It's going to take such drastic work between balancing and some design issues at the core of the game to actually make this a fun experience, if you know what I mean. Like, that's just at least how I feel about it right now.
No, I totally get that. I mean, I'm always going to be, I'm positive on the game, but I totally understand where your criticisms are coming from, because I do have some caveats I would want to add though, but I will agree they're valid concerns. I guess first off, like the Steam things, obviously one thing's patterns with Steam is that Battlefield 5 right now is being picked up by people in the international market more because it's technically a less intensive title and it's cheap a lot. So I think part of the surge for Battlefield 5 has come from people who traditionally haven't been up to date on the franchise. But I said, and then I think with crossplay, I think is an important thing, because crossplay in some ways is kind of like an artificial buffer for the player count, right? For instance, if Battlefield 5 had crossplay, it would still be supported now because you could actually find content, right?
Right.
Battlefield 2042 may not have the player count that EA wants it to. I think it's honestly, I do think it's pretty high though for what it is, but it's never to EA's expectations. And but the fact that it's crossplay certainly does help maintain longevity. What else? You said is the long-term projections of things. I think I'll put it this way. I think we're still early on. Battlefield 2042 is not going to be fixed in a year. Okay, that's very obvious right now, and that anyone who says otherwise is deluding themselves. It might have all the bugs fixed in a year if we're lucky, but it's not going to have the expected gameplay refinements we need in a year. And you want to know how I know that? Because that's how things were with Battlefield 4. Right? And 2042 is a lot more complex with a lot more going on under the hood, because at least with Battlefield 4, once they got the bug fixes done, they didn't have as bad of a CPU optimization mess as Battlefield 2042 does right now.
Right.
So 2042 is not going to be an acceptable product for at least maybe a year and a half. That's just how it's going to be. But I will say that I think EA has made their bed with regards to the Battlefield universe by using 2042 as a linchpin. Because it's not like, I'm not saying that they could do it, but they've kind of forced themselves into it, because from what looks like all their IPs are based on the 2042 universe. They have no choice but to develop it. And I think at least now, I'm not an EA defender, but the company has changed a lot since 2013. I think especially for their flagship franchise, they're willing to take short-term financial hits for long-term financial gains. So I do think they will give 2042 the money that it needs, especially now they're seeing a lot of the outcry for how people wished Battlefield 5 got support. I am positive on that point, but right now the devs are still on Christmas break. We're looking at 1.5 years of necessary improvements to get to an acceptable state. We're not going to be in for a good time for this game anytime soon.
Yeah.
So before I continue, I want to say now I'm moving on to the second game I'm showcasing, especially before we really launch into the diatribe air combat. So this is Project Wingman. It came out about like a few weeks ago and plus a year, and it was all the shit on Steam. It was like, great fighter jet game, and I love it. And it's been ported to Xbox. I think for the Series X and Xbox One, but that can't be confirmed. I'm not an Xbox guy. And this game is basically developed by 3 people plus like voice actors. So here's the thing, it's incredibly well optimized. My CPU, I have a relatively old CPU for a low-end machine nowadays. And I'm not CPU bound, I'm GPU bound on this game, which is really rare. Here, let me bring up the NVIDIA overlay just so you can see once we get into it. And it's a fantastic air combat game. It's not the best Well, actually, what am I saying? It is the best air combat game out there, in my opinion. But it's such a fulfilling experience compared to 42 offers in air combat. And I really want to showcase you because I know you're looking for stuff on your channel to bring out. And I think if you ever pick up a Project Wingman on sale for Xbox, it's definitely a worthwhile investment.
Yeah, I might check it out.
All right, let me try to find a nice battle to. We'll start with this one. This is light spoilers, but this is still early in the campaign. And this game has replayability. It doesn't have the same replayability as Project Wingman, or not as Ravenfield, because it's not really a, it's still somewhat story focused, but it has, in addition to the base game campaign with replayable missions, it has a roguelike conquest mode that I suck at, but I mean, this game has, here, I'll just let you see when we get to it, and you can make some choices. So, before we get loaded into the hangar, so please continue with your thoughts, though.
What were we talking about?
Longevity for Battlefield 2042.
Okay. Oh, yeah. That's where we were. I mean, it can. I just feel like it's going to take a pretty big miracle. It can happen. It just they are really going to have to invest in it, because I do think that, like we talked about earlier when we were talking about Battlefield 5, it felt like they cut off the support for that game right as it was starting to pick up some steam, even though they had some steam with the Pacific launch and then promptly murdered it.
Yep.
With the TTK changes again. But I think the last update that they did, I think had a lot of content people appreciated. And you could tell some of the assets that they were working on, they were going to go to the Eastern Front, and I think they had an opportunity to really catch some heat and go on with that game. But because of the nature of it being a live service, and it's just kind of the way that those can be sometimes, they cut it off and decided to focus on the next game, which we all thought would be a banger. Little did we know, but like you kind of said, though, they might just hunker down and try to work this one out, because there is potential there. I think the game itself has some potential. It just needs so much work to actually get there.
I want to say, like, one caveat is, like, Battlefield 2042 has already made a lot more money than Battlefield 5. Now, of course, it took a lot more money to develop, but I think that gives it a good base for which they can get the investment needed to pad the funding for it. But please, otherwise, continue.
Yeah, no, and that's another good point. 2042 had such hype for it, and just the thought of it as a modern shooter, because Battlefield 5 was dead basically as soon as they showed it off.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
People just didn't like it. They were just like, what the fuck is this?
Battlefield 5's full-on potential pretty much died, in terms of how it would be endearing to players, died before the reveal trailer was even halfway through.
Right. Whereas with 2042, I feel like if you do things like give us the ability to equip AI skins, or even just run as, like, instead of having a specialist, just run as a default soldier, I think people would appreciate that, just because they like that kind of gritty, faceless type of soldier out on the battlefield. Like, they like that kind of thing. Even people that I see on the game, like, not everyone, some of them are wearing their bright orange Jisoo Pike Hazard outfit and things like that. That's fine, nothing wrong with that. But you'll see some people also trying to put on the most tactical looking specialists that they possibly can, which is fine too. And I think doing things like that, trying to bring the game more in line with what they advertised initially, which is what people got so hyped for, I think that could do a lot just for the game on its own. Not to mention once they start to work on balancing and cleaning up the game as far as that. And then, of course, bugs kind of goes without saying, because if you don't fix that, no one's going to play it anyway. It needs a lot, but it's in a much better spot as far as, I think, the broader community capacity to come back. As far as, like, just the reception of the game and the idea of the game in people's heads, it needs a ton of work. I think it's kind of weird to describe, because the way I see it, people may be more willing to come back to this game in a similar way to how people went back to Battlefield 4. But I think it needs a lot more work than a game like Battlefield 5. If that makes sense.
No, that does, right? It's trying to be larger scale to their credit, but we're seeing the issues when you don't. Yeah, I don't know. I think we're saying things that. There's not much for me to add. We're covering a lot of big points. You especially. Um, I think at the end of the day, the situation, it definitely is not in the same boat for post-launch survivability as Battlefield 5. And I think one of the, I guess, good bad things is that the console markets are kind of starved of a really cool near-future shooter at the moment anyway, and 24/2 kind of fills that niche. So there might be enough console sales to kind of propel it, or further propel it to get the money it needs to work on that. But no matter what, it's undeniably in a far more rough spot. Look, they should have delayed this game to March, in my opinion.
Yes.
They should have delayed it to March, and then had the season 1 start right after launch. That's what they should have done. And here's the thing. I actually would have preferred that too, because then the game wouldn't have released during my last actual semester, my last practical semester. So I would have time to play it. But that's just my thing. But the game should have been delayed. I don't really think there was anything else. There's so much that we talk about that could have been fixed, because we only had a beta. We had a a technical playtest, which was really an alpha, but we didn't have a true alpha in this game. That we should have paid attention to that, I think, more. I should have, definitely. And here's the thing. I think the game, optimization performance-wise, is actually worse than what it was in the beta.
To an extent, yes. I think, like, for me on Xbox, I had a ton of flickering and stuff, like, all over my screen the whole time. But as far as hit reg and everything like that, yeah, the beta was way better. It was so much more consistent. And you also didn't have a lot of the stupid unlocks, like cannons on the Jeeps and stuff. There's so many more annoying things. Like, honestly, even in the beta, I didn't have really a huge issue with the helicopters. They would get annoying from time to time, but I didn't really, if you knew where to go, like, I really didn't have an issue with them.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I agree. For me, the beta, I had higher average frame rates out there. I mean, there was still bugs, but the beta didn't really feel too different from me in terms of the mechanics, but the team play is a lot better than the beta just because we have all the specialists. And I should have paid attention. I think in some ways, helicopter gameplay might have gotten slightly worse since the beta, at least for the Nightbird, because I'm always a sort of light attack craft, maneuverable, but lots of firepower. I love that kind of stuff. And the miniguns in the beta sucked, and I almost kind of feel like they've just gotten worse.
Yeah.
I'm glad they
probably
did.
have.
The flight controls for helicopters are better than what they were in the beta. They don't force you. After a certain angle, they don't keep forcing you upwards on your angle of attack, but it's not ideal. But the specialists, I think honestly, there's a lot of people talking about the specialists, but I want to, I have my sort of opinion of how Battlefield should handle socialization, but why don't you bring up your thoughts about the specialists, customization, and the social elements?
For me, as far as the specialists, it's kind of a tough spot. I see the potential with them, but I also feel like a lot of the issues in the game stem with the existence of the specialists. Like, you would have to rework them in such a way that they wouldn't quite be specialists. They'd be a lot closer to, say, the elites in Battlefield 5 than what we have now, at least for it to work properly, in my opinion. I mean, I see some of the value of having things like the gadgets tied to them, because a lot of people complained in BF5, they're like, oh, well, I can't tell what class I'm coming up against because they all look completely different. And I get that. I don't know how many people outside of the competitive players that are really looking at that kind of a thing. But with specialists, you see a Jisoo Pike, you're like, okay, well, I have an idea of what she's capable of. I just don't know what primary she's holding, but usually you can look at them and have an idea. I get that, but I think you also have these issues with the specialists because you tie the gadgets to them, and you, of course, got to make as many as you can to make money in the live service. Well, now you got to take some pretty mundane stuff and make it interesting so that people are going to play with that one and buy skins for that one and whatnot. Which is why we have things like Boris with his automated turret, or a guy like Dozier who has half blast damage, which is cool, but he also has a shield, which is kind of like, why? It feels like in its current state it's too mundane, but then do you buff it so more people use Dozier and then he's just deflecting bullets at people? Like, how do you manage that kind of a thing? And then at some point it's like, well, then what's the point of it? If it's too strong, then it's a nuisance. If it's too weak, then it has no reason to exist. Whereas I feel like with your traditional classes, you don't even have that issue. It's like, a ballistic shield is a ballistic shield. You can choose to run it if you want to, but there's no money tied to picking this gadget. So that's why I feel like what they did in Battlefield 5 with the Elite skins just works better, because I think Dozier looks awesome. I know I keep bringing up him. He looks awesome, but I never run him because he's just not useful in my opinion. Whereas if he was, say, an assault class or just a skin I can pick, I could just put him on my assault class and run him as much as I want with whatever setup that I want. I don't mind the live service. I think the live service is just kind of the up-to-date way to do post-launch stuff. I think as time has gone on since the kind of success of Warzone and whatnot, I think we are starting to see some of the negatives of a live service, but I still think it outweighs the issues that we would see with like a premium model. Obviously, Activision's going to be a bit scummier than other companies with how they handle things like that. I don't think Battlefield had quite the issue with loot boxes that Call of Duty did, or even some other games. But I think it needs work. I think trying to jam certain things into a game that don't work for it is just, I don't know. There's plenty of solutions out there, and I don't think they're going to do away with specialists. But I feel like a big core of the issue is just the fact that they exist.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely see your points. Here's my opinion on specialists is kind of, well, here, I'll start off with some historical perspective first before I go into this.
Mm-hmm.
So Battlefield 2, I think, had a ton of different classes, but if you look at them, a lot of those class roles were absorbed by things like recon and assault and engineer, right? It kind of got condensed. Yeah. I think specialists might be a way to bring back some of the more expansive classes we had and their unique capabilities, but in an updated format, with the balance of being able to pick your secondary gadget and weapons. I think one thing that really is off-putting with specialists, here, I'll put this way, get the cosmetic elements for right now. I think specialists and specializations can be a really good addition to the gameplay-wise, and I think they are proven to be a good addition gameplay-wise, because a specialization allows you to do zany things that the traditional class structure usually doesn't permit. So theoretically, it'd be great for sandbox, and we're already seeing it in the unique interpretation of gadgets such as Angel's support airdrop box and Sundance's smart explosives. But I think one of the big issues with specialists right now is that there's not enough emphasis on support play, because there's only 2 specialists who specialize in team support right now. And there's so much emphasis on tying the specialist to the specializations, so the cosmetics and the gameplay are in the same package as opposed to separated. And I think that's a huge off-putting thing. And like personally, I don't have too much problem with it, but if I had the choice, I would rather they separate the character from the specialization. So you could have, say, Emma Roser, and she's using the Dozer specialization, right? You could have Falk, and she's using the, well, maybe not, they won't call it the Iris specialization, but they call it the sort of maybe the APS specialization. Specializations as a gameplay mechanic, I think, are a great evolution to return us to the depth of the prior, more expensive class systems with the possibilities of a better sandbox. But I think we've given up so much of the sort of player, personal, emotional investment that we start to get with Battlefield 5 and customization, that it's something that DICE should be so quick to throw away, because people like the anonymous soldiers, not necessarily because they were anonymous soldiers, but because you could feel a sense of ownership when you played as them, You kind of were playing as yourself, a random soldier, and at least no matter what you did on that battlefield, your success or your defeat, it was your story, not someone else's. And I think even though Battlefield 4, Battlefield 3, and 1, they weren't overt with player cosmetics, you were really a nobody, you still had the anonymity that lent you greater ownership of your game narrative. And Battlefield 5, did a great step forward in giving you a lot more agency on that regards. But with Battlefield 2042, by tying your cosmetics to the specialization you're playing, you're losing out on that. And I think it's not apparent, right? It's not something that just stands out immediately, but it's something that's kind of ephemeral and becomes an element if you kind of play through and experience the emotional side of things. And a lot so that's kind of my take on things, right? So basically, TLDR is that specializations are a great way to combine the best and the most. It's a good way to combine the old and the new Battlefield classes, but they need to find a way to separate the characters so we can have personal ownership of our experiences in the game.
Right. Yeah, no, I agree with that. That does actually give me an idea. First, I want to say this game, was it called Wingman? Project Wingman?
Yeah.
It looks freaking gorgeous. It looks really cool.
This is 75% resolution scale. I'm not even getting 60 FPS.
That looks amazing.
This is like
aside from the FPS.
Yeah, this is one of the few games where I can play it at 20 FPS no problem, because although it's like it plays well at low FPS, which I find very surprising. Because I've been playing this at 1 frame res, I'll dip into like 17 FPS sometimes when I'm flying through a cloud, but I can still dogfight effect just as effectively as I could at like 80 FPS, 100 FPS on my laptop. So this was a Steam bestseller, and you can really see why, because this is still an early level mission, and it's fun.
Yeah, it looks awesome. But what I was going to say, and what you said kind of gave me a little bit of a good way to articulate what I wanted to get at. In RPG games, there's two different kinds of RPGs that you can play. There's like the Witcher kind of RPG where you have this pre-established character and you get invested in them, and the whole story kind of revolves around building that character. Not entirely, they're still themselves, but you take them in a certain direction. I think if you apply that to FPS, you have that sort of with a game like Apex Legends, and that feels kind of like what they're going with 2042. But I think what people like is, at least as Battlefield fans, is, you could say, the more Skyrim approach, where you build your own story from the ground up. Like, it's your own whole experience. You make all the decisions yourself, and it's entirely you. And that's where that anonymity that you described, why that's so appealing to people. It's like, I think it was on my last video where you left a comment and we talked a little bit about this, where it's like that drop of water in a bucket type of feeling. Like, kind of like that. Maybe not everyone feels the same way about that feeling, but they like the anonymity because, like you said, you can kind of write your own story when you're on the battlefield. And it's for you. It's not for Sundance. It's not for McKay. It's not for Boris. It's for you. It's your own story. And it really connects you to the battlefield. So that's why I think people like that. That's why, like, I think changes like going from first-person melees to third-person ones is just really jarring for people, because they're just like, oh, that just doesn't. Number one, it looks like Warzone. Number two, the first person was so brutal and immersive and cool and unique. So
yeah,
I think that's a big part of it.
I'm so glad you brought up RPGs, because here, it's a great way to approximate things, right? Battlefield should be the Skyrim of first-person shooters instead of the Witcher 3 of first-person shooters.
Right.
That's a real. I think a big part, and I discuss this a lot, is this. So, like, one of the best ways to try to entertain players is by giving them a better community and the tools for that community. So, I mean, one of the games I've been playing big since basically this time last year. I started playing was The Division 2, because obviously I like playing The Division a lot. In high school, I only ever got like 50 hours, but my friends got me into The Division 2. And I've been really that was my core game until Battlefield 2042 came out. And it's kind of become my core game again now that my semester is over and I have time to grind. And in that game, you can make your own character cosmetic-wise, you can give them whatever equipment you want, and you have your own base of operations that you can actually physically travel in. You have a social hub where you can walk over to and matchmake, or if you don't want to go through all the hassle, you can just matchmake from a menu. Like, the Division 2 handles all the sort of social functions that Battlefield could have and make work, right?
Yeah.
And Battlefield, the thing that really miffs me is that Battlefield 2042, of all Battlefield games, had the best narrative basis for things like custom characters and an actual social hub, in-game social hub like what Call of Duty World War II had. And the fact they didn't go for that and instead went with something that actively deprives you of the experience is kind of mind-boggling, because the things like the social hub in Destiny is what Battlefield can adapt. Call of Duty tried it, but it didn't work because of the nature of Call of Duty and because they kind of half-assed it. But
yeah,
those are the kinds of systems a Battlefield game could have success with. They don't need to look to Call of Duty. They can need to look to the other large-scale multiplayer games. Like, in some ways, Battlefield really needs to take more inspiration from MMOs and large-scale multiplayer games compared to arena shooters like COD.
Well, think about having like a co-op test range, but it's on the Exodus. Think of all the cool things you could do, like gathering stats and friends, and like even just things like creating videos would be so much easier for guys. Like, I don't know if you watch SMK Gaming, but he does a lot of like really in-depth statistical stuff, and he's always going into like AI bot matches to get it. But I'm like, imagine if you had like a co-op test range where you could just go with friends and test these little mechanics in the game out to make his videos.
Yeah.
And just being able to hang out and have fun mini games. Like, why not have like an accuracy competition, like the test range of BF5? How you had like the bullet tracers whenever you go to the shooting part of the range.
Yeah, that was one of the cool innovations.
Yeah, why not have something like that, and then you and your friends see how many targets you hit? Just have little mini games like that you can explore on the Exodus. Make the Exodus part of it, and your specialists can be based off of yourself.
So I mean, it might be something to introduce post launches. I'm very confident they're going to kind of rework specialists eventually in some regards. It might not be the way we want, but it's kind of coming.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I don't think they're going to totally revert them or put them into classes. I know some people think, oh yeah, they'll just put them in class. I don't think that's going to happen.
I'll be honest.
I think it's...
Now that we've seen the potential for unique gameplay specialists, I support them as a gameplay function, but they do need to divorce them from the cosmetics.
Yes.
And another point, kind of referring to what I said about like the sort of social hub and things, is that at the end of the day, Battlefield is trying to mimic the socialization experiences that Call of Duty has, but I don't think that's a good idea, because Call of Duty at the end of the day is a 8v8 or less arena shooter, whereas Battlefield was a 32 versus 32, or now 64 versus 64. It's basically the closest you can get to an MMORPG while still being an arcade shooter, right?
Yeah,
and they need to
pretty much.
They need to be looking at MMORPGs for inspiration on their social hub elements instead of arena shooters. It's just it's closer in their design, but in terms of how you have to design your systems, they're a better MMORPGs are a better bet in mine. But I'm not a game dev. That's not what I studied, so I could be wrong. Like, that's always, every caveat I gotta say is, I'm not a game dev, so I could be completely wrong.
Yeah.
But there's so
I always gotta throw that out there.
Seeing how well things can be done in MMORPGs really exposes like just all the cool things that first person help us away. There's a lot of cool things across game genres they could all take from each other, and I would hope they would.
Yeah.
But then I would really love the idea of us being able to make a custom specialist that you could choose like one of the specialists as a base, and then we can use their voice and all the cosmetics are swappable, so we can functionally make our own. Okay, I'm completely losing track of what's going on because of the time, but that's fine. I don't understand why we can't use like a custom specialist for Portal and maybe Hazard's own balance as well. But even for Portal, that'd be a great idea, because Portal is the mode for kind of this stuff if they're not going to do it all-out warfare.
Yeah. And in some ways, it feels like Portal, it feels like the guys at Portal and Ripple Effect are almost doing their own thing separate from what all-out warfare is. Like, having Rush up there, having TDM and everything, like, they're just, if anyone's listening to the community, it's them.
Yeah.
At least what it seems like to me. Like, on Twitter, Justin Weeb, the guy that's, like, in charge of it, I hope I'm pronouncing his name right, but it looks like it's just Weeb. He's always talking to the community. He's always asking questions like, what do you guys want to see from Portal? And like, people ask him stuff, what about the XP? And he's like, well, we're working on that, but what modes do you want to see? And I swear, like, within a couple of weeks after people started asking for Rush was in Portal.
Yeah.
And whereas in All Out Warfare, it feels like whatever we ask for, just aside from the 64-player modes, just hasn't really happened.
I think I will say, like, I don't really describe simply that one dev team is more competent in PR than the other, but I think part of that is that Portal is a lot better or further along in development than All Out Warfare is. So it just might be that the Portal team doesn't have to spend up a year and a half catching up like All Out Warfare's team would be doing. So they kind of can do stuff like that. But
oh yeah, for sure. I mean, I'm not saying that one's more competent than the other. I'm just
I know that's not
more
what
like,
you're implying. It's just like something I want to point out for just as a general consideration. You know, my education, I'm supposed to focus on systems that we're evaluating, right? Gotta apply here. I want to see if the Yellow Jackets will give me something useful in my life, aside from tears and bad sleep.
Oh man.
Oh, I think I got shot. Yeah, I got shot down. I could feel it in my controller before I froze.
I love those low frame rates.
Project Wingman.
It'll tell you things.
It's a really fun game, though. I mean, I'll be honest. I only have like 30 hours in it, but I play it, and this is the kind of game I would play like over the summer when I got back from doing a shift at the lab. On Friday nights, I just come here and I'd play a mission for like 2 or 3 hours, and it was just the most therapeutic shit ever.
It looks pretty chill. It reminds me of did you play Il 2 Sturmovik back in the day? It's
No.
probably still. It looks pretty similar.
I'm sorry. I mean, I looked into that series, and I remember seeing it on Steam when I was like in 2014, all that. But I guess I don't think I'm mature enough yet to really enjoy hardcore flight sim stuff. Like I play Squad on occasion, but even that's not enough.
Yeah.
But I mean, my gaming tastes are starting to diversify a bit, and I think that's to the benefit. And
yeah.
But yes, I mean, Battlefield 2042 it needs so much work. But I do think that the fundamentals are more solid than Battlefield 5's were, and I think EA is in a position where they can develop off it better. It's just we got to be patient, unfortunately, and the game that should have been delayed to March was not delayed to March, and we're just going to have to put up with it as is.
Yeah. No, I agree.
So,
there's a lot less just pure frustration built into the game. A lot of it does come down to the bugs and whatnot, and some of the balance, but I think balancing is a bit easier to change than, oh yeah, attrition is this core mechanic of the game.
balancing is, yeah, I mean, balance is, I don't want to trivialize balancing by saying it's like small potatoes, but balancing now is just going into the dashboard and changing a number. It's not how it was in older games. You have to go into the INIs on their end with whatever software they had, right?
Right.
Things like this are much easier to handle because of the new back-end system. But at the same time, look, man, I have my gripes about Battlefield 2042, but right now it's the only AAA game on market where I can use an F-35 to shoot up Nazis and get XP for it. So it has potential.
It is true.
I just hope that they stick with it. So
that is very true.
I mean, okay, now, before we tailor things up, why don't we have a real big discussion on air power in 2042? Because, let's be honest, like, air combat has always been the black sheep of the Battlefield franchise.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's been super dominant, and other times it's just been completely ignored. Right now. So, what are your thoughts on the philosophy of air combat in Battlefield in general, and how do you think it should be?
Well, I just want to say I only have like a few minutes left because I'm about to have to go because fiance's. But I do want to give my thoughts on it real quick. I think because it's a combined arms shooter, it absolutely has to have a place. I think the real struggle is because I feel like for some players, using something like a minigun, for example, like on the helicopter, it can be difficult if you're not the most accurate player in the world, on top of managing flying the vehicle, of course. But I also think that things that are super high splash damage are kind of annoying because it doesn't take nearly as much skill. And you have things like with Battlefield 1, where you can just have the attack plane just spam cannons across the ground and pick up a bunch of kills without really having to aim too well. I think, like I said, it's a combined arms game, so it needs to have a place because, I mean, you're basically missing an entire element if you just take it out. As annoying as it can be sometimes, a good pilot can have a pretty big effect on the battlefield, and I think it is something that can be very valuable. You know, air superiority has been a big part of just, I mean, even real life combat ever since the First World War, even not so much as in the Second World War, but ever since then, it has been integral. So if you're going to portray combat, it needs to have a place. I do think dogfighting and the mechanics of it in a game like Battlefield 1 were pretty fucking awesome. I don't think there was in depth as, say, Battlefield 4's aerial combat, but I think it was fun and relatively easy to pick up, and I wish they hadn't added air superiority at the very end of its life cycle, because I played the shit out of like the fighter plane.
Yeah.
It was just so much fun. And then Battlefield 5, it feels like they couldn't figure it out in that game, and they haven't figured it out in 2042. I don't know if it's just the way the planes feel. They feel like they're underpowered, but they don't turn well enough to make up for it.
And they don't have good air-to-ground attack. It's only the AGM. There's no rockets, no bombs, or nothing.
Right, exactly. It's just, here's your couple of options, and that's it. There's nothing interesting to do with them. Not to mention there's no real tactics to really have, because you can only do a couple of things.
Yeah.
So it's
Hopefully it gets rectified through seasons, but you know, it's a way no matter what.
Yeah. And I wouldn't even mind like an aerial vehicle focused season. Like they had something like I guess Naval Strike wasn't entirely aerial focused. I think that's the right DLC. But basically where you have like this combination of like naval and aerial like combo
Turning Tides,
combat. Yeah, something like that. Yeah, Turning Tides is a perfect example where that's really like the focus, because that felt like it felt like World War II doing like the Battle of Midway when you're at what's that island map where you can have both the dreadnoughts.
It was Heligoland Bite.
Yeah, that one, Heligoland Bite. That felt awesome. That felt like the Battle of Midway.
It was all yeah. That's, I mean, people hate that map for infantry play, but if you want naval experiences, that's unbeatable.
Yeah, it was awesome. Of course, you gotta understand. It ain't an infantry map. You gotta understand. It ain't gonna play well if you're trying to main infantry on it. But there's a reason you can grab vehicles in Battlefield, and that was the map to do it on.
Yeah. Well, it's been great having you here, and I appreciate the feedback. And I can't guarantee how well the audio is going to come through, but I'll definitely share this video with you for record keeping and all that. And I just gotta say, it's great to have your thoughts on the franchise, because I always appreciate your willingness to go deep into these subjects and think them through. You know, you're not a clickbait YouTuber. You care about and most of all, you actually care about the well-being of the franchise. You're not in for the clicks. So
right, I appreciate that, because I go for that so hard. I want to actually sound like I make sense before I make a video, and I do want these games to be as best as they can be. So I really appreciate that.
Look, man, I'm not a GT prof. I give A's for effort, because as it turns out, people don't even bother with effort, and you give good stuff with your effort, right? Yeah. We won't always be in a complete agreement, but that's the best part, is that we can talk about things we disagree on, and it still works.
Right. Yeah, civil disagreement is the most interesting conversations to have, honestly. I mean, it's always great to agree, but if you can find a good disagreement and kind of almost work out solutions that way. You can change people's minds that way. It's honestly, not enough people do it.
Yeah. And I'm just saying, at the end of the day, hopefully, Battlefield 2042 ends up, I hope in 2 years, 3 years, we can have a stream like this again, where instead of talking about all the stuff that went wrong with Battlefield 2042, we talk about what an amazing recovery it has and how it's on its way to being a Battlefield 3 tier game.
Oh, absolutely, man. Absolutely. I really hope that's the case. But that's obviously the best case scenario, so let's hope for it.
And one final note, Project Wingman has an absolutely baller soundtrack, so I would definitely advise you picking up this game when you get the time or it comes up on a sale, because it's an experience.
Yeah, I'll definitely check it out. I've been itching for like a game that can just go and fly around in. This looks really freaking cool.
When you're losing altitude at full thrust on F-35 in Battlefield 2042, just quit the game and come play this instead.
I think that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna see if I can find it. I got some Christmas gift cards, so I might try to pick it up on the.
Hey, that's good.
Laptop.
It's I'm just saying, you know, I don't know. I can't. It's hard for me to not praise this game. So, whatever, right? It's been great having you on my stream. I always love to get the best, most interesting people in their fields on here, and video games are not an exception. So I'm glad that you can make it, and I look forward to giving feedback on your videos in the future.
Hey man, it's been a pleasure, and I look forward to reading your comments. You always leave really good in-depth comments. They're a joy to read, and I'm happy you invited me to the show. Hopefully we can do another one.
Sure thing. Just let me know date and time, and that's it. So, for any of you tuning in tonight, this has probably been the most intellectually stimulating Battlefield discussion I'm ever going to have for the moment. And let's say it couldn't have come at a better time.
Oh yeah. Yeah, we definitely I needed something positive Battlefield related. I've been kind of in a rut. I'm sure you've noticed I haven't posted many videos the last couple weeks.
I don't blame you. Besides,
So...
dude, you need to get off Twitter, man. It's not that I don't have a Twitter, it's I don't use it.
It's rough out there.
Look,
seeing
man,
everybody. So
I ain't no Luddite, but we could definitely use a break. Oh my god, I don't want to talk about internet toxicity because that's a whole other thing, but it'll be it's something mentioned. But dude, I just want to say, if I don't do this for the views, but you covered a lot of really good information here, and you made a lot of observations that I haven't seen from any other Battlefield YouTubers. So you should share this video on your channel, just because I want everyone else to hear the stuff you've said. Because
for sure.
you're like, I forgot when we were on the Wake Island knockoff, and you were discussing sort of the design the subtleties, and you had a lot of good stuff that would fit in your videos that I think people would love to hear.
Yeah. Honestly, what I might do is I'll probably go back and rewatch this and probably just re-jot it down and just kind of like clean it up for like a full-on video.
Oh yeah, that works too. Also, it seems like
and of course I'll plug the stream for you.
We got I just now checked my YouTube feed. It seems like we got like bots, so I'll have to clean those out later.
The bot spam's always fun.
Hey, it's the modern internet. What can you say, right? It's the best.
Yeah.
But again, thanks for showing up. It's really been a blast. You know, perfect way to end off the old year as well.
Oh, of course. Great way to end the year. Great way. It's been super fun.
So yeah, that's it. Thanks for showing on, and good night.
Yeah, you have a good one, man.
You too.
Later.